Here.
Ken Cleveland.
Here.
Rosanna Glenn.
Here.
Shannon Hughes Brown.
Here.
Ken Jackson.
Here.
Blaze Messenger.
Here.
John Post.
Here.
Jessica Lamb.
Here.
Heather Jacobs.
Here.
We have no members of administration. Joe Colada. Joe Costa. Mike Berger. Jack Buckus.
Here.
Emily Cifuentes. Am I missing anybody else? Okay. Mayor, Town Manager Salvatore.
Here.
And Mr. Jack Hennigan.
And then Sharon's on the phone. Sharon DeVoe.
Chair DeVoe, okay.
Here. Okay, thank you. Approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda as written?
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Any discussion on the agenda? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Okay, agenda is approved. And then approval of minutes from the September 21st meeting.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Okay,
I just have to abstain.
we have one abstention. Thank you. Okay. All right. Any public comments? Okay, on here. There's no comments in the email inbox either. There was one comment on Facebook, but I'm gonna just talk about it during my update. Okay, so for my update, so there's been a lot of activity this last couple weeks that directly and indirectly impacts the building committee. I just wanted to provide a highlight in some of this activity, and then I can open up for discussion after my report. The first thing I wanted to go over, and I briefly spoke about at our last meeting, was a response that Shannon and I wrote up to the last town council meeting. In your packets, you should have received a copy of the letter that was sent to all members of the town council. There are a few items in here that I do want to highlight, since many of you are seeing this for the first time, but I don't want to read the entire thing because it is 4 pages long. First and most importantly, we requested that our charge is clarified so that everyone is aware and understands the roles and responsibility of the building committee, and to ensure we do everything in our power to make sure that we do not jeopardize the reimbursement potential from the state of Connecticut. Right now, I think there's an interpretation issue. I spent the last few weeks researching other towns and their building committees, as well as their purchasing policies. Other towns clearly give their building committees full authority to act as they see fit in the execution of the new buildings within the parameters set by the state of Connecticut. We also made some recommendations regarding the purchasing policy that we felt we could help ensure we stay within our budget. Rocky Hill, for example, has a clause where they can go to a preferred bidder if within a certain percentage of the entire project cost to match the lowest bid. Weathersfield allows the committee to reject all bids if they're all too high, for example. Neither option is referenced in our current purchasing policy, I don't think. If the building committee were to be given the authority that I believe we should have, then we would still be able to take these actions if either of these situations were to come up in the future. I'm especially concerned with bids coming too high, considering that our budget is kind of tight. So having that flexibility would definitely be helpful. I would like to stress that we appreciate the guidance that the purchasing policy provides, and I don't think we would remove any steps per se, as long as the building committee has final decision and approval on all major steps, per the expectation of the state of Connecticut to, again, ensure we get full reimbursement from the state. I look forward to hearing what our Arcadis input is to all this during their update today. That's you. Another item that came up yesterday is a comment made on Facebook, and this kind of was I was alluding to before, that spoke about this committee's involvement regarding the Gear Street project and its impact to our students when this building goes up. Though this body has no say in the fate of that project, meaning we will have no voting authority whatsoever, we could and maybe should do some research on the impact of that project on the students' health and safety and bring it to whichever board suitable to hear the report, or request that a study be conducted that looks into any risks before a decision is made by the town. Again, we should probably have a discussion on this and determine as a committee how we want to proceed here. And that's all I had. Any comments?
So you said this letter did? This letter did get sent? Or?
Yes, it did get sent.
When?
A week ago, I'd say, a week ago. I think it was a week ago last Monday.
Was there any response?
I did receive direct response from half of the town council, and including Mayor Fornbach. Last I heard, they were going to have a special meeting to look at possible changes to the charge. But then they Arcadis engaged Jack into the discussion that I wasn't really a part of until yesterday when I got the email from you to Shannon and to Sharon, Marianne, and Mr. Salvatore. So that's what I'm looking for you to tell me what the update on all that is and what we're going to do about the charge. And now we do have a line item on our agenda under new business part C to go over the possible changes to the charge. So at that point we can look into it, and if we're going to make changes to the charge, it would have to go back to the town council and they would have to approve it. They'd probably have to go send it through their attorney or whatever, is my guess. But that's the latest I have on that. Any other thoughts, discussion, questions? Okay, all right, nice. Okay, moving on to the next item, RFQ drafts. So let's start with construction manager. Do we have copies of those? We don't have copies of them. Okay. Did anyone send their copies to Lisa for her? Oh, we did. Okay. Can we pause on that while we get them printed out? And then.
On the email it does say, I don't know, it says share with Lisa Hicks via Google Docs. So I don't know if that's not a direct website. I mean, a direct email from her.
Yeah, so I don't have it. I can forward it to you. Yeah,
This is
I can print them out.
Okay, not everyone has.
I can forward.
Oh.
Do we need to do a motion to like postpone that discussion till we get the copies, or do we just move on? I have no idea. Move on. We don't need to have a motion. Thank you. All right. With that, let's talk about the charge. Jack, you want to give us some kind of guidance here?
Sure. As part of our startup effort in the last couple of weeks, we did have a conversation. It was Thursday of last week with Sharon, Marianne, and town manager Tony regarding the purchasing policy versus the charge, and is there any conflict, and how do they blend, how do they work together? So I spent some time analyzing both documents and came up with a summary Generally speaking, the charge is in basic structure consistent with what we've seen in other towns as far as the expectations of the building committee and the authorities provided to them. One of the areas that wasn't covered in the charge was, as you know, the selection of the project manager, which is ordinarily any of the consultants that go along with a school project is under the purview of the building committee. But for whatever reason, that wasn't one of your charges. Let me get the highlights here. There's the references to following the procurement directions, the policy that the town has, and it references that any department, board, commission, or town officer needs to follow a process that's approved by the town manager. Well, the building committee isn't a department, it's not a board, it's not a commission, it's an entity that was created fresh for one specific task. So that's a little between the piano keys as far as responsibilities that I would say should be clarified, but there are other things in the charge that do provide you authorities. Again, overall, the general structure was consistent with what we're seeing with other building committees. What did seem to conflict with the wording of the charge and what actually occurred was the architect selection process, because the charge clearly says the committee shall select the architect. And then there's reference in that section, and I'll flip to it directly. Select the architect and/or engineering firms, and I presume that would cover the breadth of consultants that we're going to need. We're going to need a commissioning agent. We're going to need testing and inspection labs, other types of consultants on the project. It talks about referencing it references the request for proposal process that adheres to all town bid policies and procedures. And it says the building committee, in coordination with the town attorney, shall negotiate a contract to be entered into by the town, subject to approval of the town council. So that's one thing we didn't hear. Arcadis didn't hear in our presence at the last meeting. We did recommend that you take the action to, in essence, put your fingerprints on the selection of the PM, on the selection of the architect, and get that in the record for the auditors. But in reading this more carefully, when it says negotiate the contract subject to approval of town council, I just don't remember hearing that it went to the town council for their blessing. So whether or not that occurred, if it hasn't, then maybe that's an internal step the committee or the town needs to take to close the loop on this particular charge as far as the town council's authority is concerned. Again, going back to my analysis,
Jack, quick question.
Sure.
Do other building committees typically go to the town council for final approval on things?
some do. Some committees are authorized to say that the chair, along with the town's legal representative, whether it's corporation counsel, whether it's a town attorney that's an outsider that's hired, negotiate the contract, and then the chair is authorized to sign on behalf of the committee, because again, the committee is the fiduciary. We have another client presently where the committee negotiated a contract, submitted it to the first selectman, who then put it on the agenda for the board of selectmen in that town, and then they gave the final vote, yes, we're okay with this contract, and Mr. First Selectman, you can sign the contract now. So again, internally, town by town, there are some variances in who has ultimate signing authority. Another point I identified, policies contain wording, the purchasing policies contain wording that grants flexibility to consider factors that would be in the town's best interest. So the word negotiate is in there. Jamie, you brought up a comment in your report about concern when it comes into, we put something out to bid and all the numbers are high, we have to accept that or reject them all. And yes, you can. As practice across the state has shown, that if something is out of budget, then in essence, unless you know that you've got some cushion from some other authorities that have been granted, you can't move forward. Now, granted, incrementally, if the architect was at $6 million, and you said, well, I don't have that in my contract for an architect, let's try again, you'd perfectly be within your role and responsibilities to say, we've got to get closer to the real number. So that's not a concern. It happens in the bid world during construction bidding, when, in this case, the CM is at risk, and they're not going to bite their own head off by taking something that's way over budget. They're going to try to get more participation and put it out on the street again. Maybe redesign something, but they're going to try to come back closer to expected values rather than just take somebody you're the lowest of a bunch of bad bids. We're not necessarily hamstrung by that. Let's see. And then one comment I made was that even through discussions at the last meeting, there seemed to be a need for clarifying the roles, whether it's clarifying it through the town council or just internally getting thoughts on paper. You've got you call them your rules of conduct, which are a pretty good start on what other committees call bylaws, which are mentioned in your charge as something that you're able to create, these bylaws, which give you a roadmap of how you internally operate. So I think that's a good first step, and we can help flesh that out with you. So conclusions, as I submitted in my emails, is the building committee was established by the council to implement the project through delegated authority. Such authority is to be wielded by the committee consistent with the policies, including considerations of factors in the town's best interest, which, again, you read the purchasing policies, although there are comments about, and the low number is our number, there is another paragraph that follows that says, and if the low number is not the number that you take, this is the process that you follow in order to get that blessed. So the wording of the policies is a little conflicting internally, because they speak of the low number as though it's an absolute and then give you the workaround. So again, issues in the best interest, I think, are fairly consistent in all the RFPs that I've responded to, just about all the RFPs that I've written, and obviously it's a factor within the policies that you've been told to operate under. Next item is successfully implement the project. The building committee must be viewed by other town parties as having the authority delegated to it in the charge. So I think we all have to get on the same page of music here. And then to clarify its structure and its methods of implementing the responsibilities, the building committee should develop and adopt bylaws consistent with the charge. Again, you're partway there with your rules of conduct, and we can flesh that out. Another thing that we'll be doing as your PM is coming up with a project management plan. We mentioned that in the past. Some of those things, as far as how we'll handle documents of certain types at certain points in time, will be captured in that, and we can economize on words and make sure that we're not duplicating efforts between the bylaws and the management plan, so that we can hit all the high points and give everybody a roadmap. And then all the team players, the architect, the CM, the various consultants, the building committee, will all get copies of that management plan. So we all know what each other is supposed to be doing as part of the team. You did mention something in your report, and it was in your letter to town council about preference. Many towns have had ordinances on the books when it comes to local bidder preference. And for a good number of years, the state was okay with that. The thought being, as long as you're buying it for the low bid number, the fact that you gave it to an entity that's in your hometown versus the other person, because the guy in your town met the low person's price, that seemed to meet the state's purchasing expectations as far as competitive bidding was concerned. There was a lawsuit out of Danbury Court. It was the city of Danbury that had a preference in effect, and a bidder on a publicly funded project, not city funded, but state money involved, complained to the court and said, wait a minute, if this is a municipality spending their own dollars, be it tax dollars or bonded funds, let them do whatever they want, because they're ultimately responsible for those funds. When you start spending other people's money, where taxpayers across the state are pitching in to the cost of this project. How do you allow a town to give preference to somebody in their jurisdiction, ignoring somebody else who might also be a state taxpayer? And ultimately, when the court decided, they said, you know what, you can no longer implement local preference ordinances on state-funded projects. Again,
What about state? What about if it wasn't local but just within the state of Connecticut? What if the preference wasn't based by the fact that they were local but rather by qualifications?
if it's a qualifications threshold, where you say that, you know, entity X, I'm gonna hire a construction manager, and entity X has never built a building in Connecticut before, they don't even understand that there is a state grant office, let alone what rules they have, that would be a reasonable selection criteria in a qualifications-based scenario. So if somebody comes from East Overshoe and wants to do a job in Connecticut, team with somebody first and learn the rules before you try to do it wrong. So that would be a,
But I'm saying if you have,
shortlisting criteria, for,
if you had 3 Connecticut-based companies, and after we interviewed them, one was definitely much better than the other 2, for example.
okay.
And then we open up the bids for all of them, and the one that we really liked was within 2% or some percentage higher than everyone else. Are we, like,
We're
they're the preference?
We're talking 2 completely different scenarios.
Okay.
One is a preference, meaning I've got a Cromwell-based business that's bidding on window shades, and he's within so many percent, just summarizing what preference policies have been in other towns. The local bidder is within, let's say, 10% of the real low bid.
Mm-hmm.
And the local bidder says, I'll match that number. I can name that to him. I'll take it for the same price. Towns in the past were able to do that because they were buying it at low bid cost. But this court decision says you can't take it away from that entity from Bloomfield, who was the low bidder, and give it to a Cromwell company just because they're a Cromwell company, even if they match the number. So that's when it comes to bidder preference, that's the term of art that describes that particular scenario. To say that you as a selection entity have a preference for a firm based on their qualifications and experience, and they're not the lowest fee in the bunch, that's when you can look at your purchasing authority that says you can consider things that are in the town's best interest. It doesn't have to be tied to low bid. And again, qualifications-based selection is intended, and is practiced by the state of Connecticut itself, is that you look at cost as one of several factors. And I just had a conversation with a building committee last week where they chose an architect, and the conversation was, do your ranking, have your vote. My top is X, my second choice is Y. They finished pretty close. Open the envelopes and see that X is twice the price of Y. Well, I really like X because I like them that much. And then you weigh, are their qualifications, is their experience so superior to somebody who is lower than them to make it worth investing more in the project to get a more experienced entity on board.
But they couldn't go back to X and ask them to match Y's bid fee?
When you turn the page and you say that you can negotiate, that is something that you can employ, and it is often employed in a school construction context. And some folks might say, look, I have experienced people, so I've got to pay them more than the other guy who might have less experienced people. So therefore, my number is higher because I have better people on my team. They might say, I can't move. They might say, okay, I'll move, or I'll meet you halfway. You don't know until you try. But again, in the concept of a qualifications-based selection, you're not going with a low bid. The state tried that for 1 year, in 2007. They tried to make architects low bid consultants. And that was because of other issues too complicated to mention, where they thought that people were getting preferential treatment and other folks were being locked out. And it wasn't an honest, competitive qualifications process. So they went to the far extreme and said, hire by low bid. And that only lasted a year, and the legislature rescinded that. So qualifications, cost has to be considered in the ultimate selection, but you're looking at cost as one of multiple factors, including experience and the strength of the firm, the strength of the team they're bringing to the project, etc.
So, going back to our charge then, are you recommending changes to the charge, or do you feel like the way the charge is written gives us the authority you think we need, and then the bylaws would just supplement that?
I think the authority is there. I think the charge itself was well written. As I said, a few quirky things in there that are different than we've seen in other towns, but different doesn't mean wrong. I think that the text of the charge clearly provides authority to this body. You're not just window dressing. So within the charge, again, in the context of other people outside of this group understanding that you have a charge and that it gives you certain authorities to let you run with it. I think the charge itself is okay. The way you blend the purchasing requirements into some of the authority that was given in the charge, maybe that's a negotiation point about how much is enough. Ultimately, the bylaws will help streamline how that actually lives out in daily life.
Does anyone have any thoughts on any of that? Is anyone comfortable with the way the charge is written?
Yeah, so in our charge, it does, give the authority to select the architect and engineering firm. That's the only vendor or contractor that's explicitly listed in the charge. When looking at that, I interpreted that line that the final recommendation from our selection committee would come back to the building committee to be discussed and a final vote to take place, which is not how the purchasing policy was then interpreted, right? So that didn't come back to the building committee. So in your opinion, Jack, would we proceed with how we went with the last round of selection, how we proceeded with the architect, and how we proceeded with the project manager? For, so now the next ones that I'm just thinking because of the next ones we're moving to are the construction manager and the commissioning agent.
So first, let me rescind the comment I made and clarify. When I said the charge itself is good but a little wonky. Wonky in the fact that it doesn't, since it mentioned an architect, and there's something in here earlier about, where is it? Uses the word contractor in there, but basically it seems as though their intent was hire the people you need to get the job done. The wording isn't as clear as it could be in that particular facet. So, and with the size of the project, you've already expressed the desire to use a CM at risk. You're not just going to put it out to bid to a general contractor. So again, if there could be some clarity provided that says basically you're select the consultants, and realistically speaking, at the early part of the project during the pre-construction effort, the construction manager is acting as your consultant as well. And then they put it to bid, you agree on a price, and then they're at risk from that point in time. But basically to hire anybody that you need, whether it's a CM, the architect, commissioning agent, test lab, find that we need a consultant for something that was not in Perkins Eastman's scope. Again, getting these people to the table to make the project a success. The charge exists to make the project succeed. So clarity on giving you clarifying the language to give you authority to build the team that you need. And if there's some reworking that can be done with that, I think that would be helpful.
Could you help us redline the charge with what verbiage you think would cover everything?
Sure. And again, we can use examples from other entities that help back up the words that we choose.
Okay. That's Shane. Anyone else? Thoughts?
Is it clear, and so we're about talk about our next two consulting firms or consultants that we're gonna need to hire. Is it clear enough what steps we need to take? Cause I don't know if I know in my mind. Sorry?
Sorry, I was saying, good question.
No, because is it the selection committee from the purchasing policy are we following that? Is our,
Right, do we need to have
How
a
do we-
subcommittee or a selection committee?
That was another good point, subcommittees. So let me take that side street.
okay,
You do have authority in the charge to create subcommittees. Subcommittees have the authority that you give to them. They can give you a summary of a particular assignment, and then you bring it back to the whole committee to act on it. There are times you can create a subcommittee that gives them authority to do something. One of the areas of life where some responsibility can be delegated is change orders. And for timeliness of action during construction, there can be thresholds. If it's within so many dollars, this is the process to get it approved, then report it back to the full committee at the next meeting. If it's above a threshold, it might be another step. Somebody else who has a higher level of authority, then report it back. If it's above that threshold, then the committee as a whole has got to act on it before anybody can pick up a hammer and make it happen. But again, that's something that in your creation of subcommittees, you can define. So as far as the next step, CM commissioning, you've already established at the last meeting a committee to work on the RFP. In effect, you've created subcommittees for those next two procurements. With the wording that's here and having read enough of these, that it seems the town council intended to give you, when they say select, that means, and then negotiate a contract, that's soup to nuts. That's run the process to completion. I would be very surprised if their intent was to make it that narrow, that was only that one consultant team and not other entities that you need, because otherwise this charge is absent how those people come to the table. So I think with the committees that you've already established to approve the RFPs, to get them on the street, to then move into your short listing and then follow a qualifications-based selection, appears appropriate under the construct that's in the charge presently. If they can clarify it, memorialize it in a more clear way, even better. But I think the structure is here that makes it reasonably inferable.
okay. I understand that we can set up subcommittees. What we tried to do with this round, we're trying to navigate between what our charge is and then the purchasing policy. So I think there was some confusion the first time we went through, and you saw us, we're trying to make sure we've got all the I's dotted, the T's crossed. The last time we set up, we recommended a selection committee, which I think was then approved through the town, if I understand correctly. It wasn't necessarily called a subcommittee. And I think we're just trying to navigate between these two. Would we have said we're setting up subcommittees for the commissioning agent and the construction manager, which also by default complies with the purchasing policy, which says we need a selection committee? Or should we have done it the way that we did it and say, all right, we recommend these folks from the building committee, we're gonna get it approved through the town that they are also the selection committee. So we just wanna make sure that we're navigating this correctly.
So I think what Jess is getting to is that we this is where the rub lies, right? A selection committee doesn't have to follow the expectations of the building committee, whereas a subcommittee does. So it's all terminology, but I almost think it doesn't matter if everyone in the town agrees to what the authority of the building committee is. And my recommendation would be to follow the purchasing policy as it's written, with the addition, and this is what we've been trying to ask for since day one, with the addition that at each major step, that being the shortlist selection and the finalist selection, those selections are brought to the building committee to discuss and vote on prior to moving to the next step. So at the end of the day, the town manager would still have final approval, just to make sure that we're not doing anything that's gonna, that we're blind to or putting the town in jeopardy for any reason, because we're not obviously don't have the level of knowledge that he has on this stuff. But the major decisions would initiate out of this building committee.
I think that last sentence, kind of summarized it. The major decisions emanate from this committee. I mean, the town manager is felt to be important to you. That's why he was mentioned as a liaison member. That's part of the composition of the building committee. There's a resource for you there. I think that using that resource to your best advantage to accomplish the charge, the goal of building a school in an appropriate way is wise. But again, as I mentioned in my email, the process that was described in the charge and what happened with the architect are kind of a fork in the road. It had similarities, but it really wasn't the way the charge was worded. And one of my conclusion statements was that to implement the project, the building committee needs to be viewed by other entities as having the authority the charge gives you. So I think some of it is just clearing the air, getting a focus. If we can maybe clarify the intent as far as all consultants and all entities that need to be part of the team, rather than just the words architect and engineers. And it's kind of broad in its construct. A lot of them were purchased under Perkins Eastman's contract, but there are others outside of that. So I think just some clarity there. But generally speaking, to create a subcommittee that might be called a selection committee, I've got a building committee that invites. I think your charge says if you're going to have a subcommittee, it's got to be people from the building committee. Other towns, for a selection committee to hire an architect, to hire a CM, sometimes bring in other people. They might even bring in the school principal and somebody from the purchasing department who are not members of the building committee,
Which we do.
to invite their knowledge into the process.
Right.
So again, the ultimate decision is on your shoulders, but you're tapping the resources available to you.
All right, Tony, do you have any thoughts on any of this you want to share? Is the red light on?
No, it is.
There you go.
Sharon?
Yes,
You want to go first?
I'm here. No, you go.
Oh, thank you, Sharon.
Okay, we're gonna address you.
Well, I agree with most of what was said. You failed to recognize that it was clarified by the town council. I believe at last month's meeting that the purchasing policy would be followed and that would clarify any inconsistencies. I take it you weren't aware of that fact. Jack, is it?
So I think what we're saying is we're going to follow the town purchasing policy, but we're going to add.
I understand that, Madam Chair. I'm just saying that while he pointed out some inconsistencies, we did bring the Director of Finance recognized that, and there was a correction voted on by the town council to follow the purchasing policy by the building committee. Sharon, last month's meeting?
Yeah,
But no changes were made to
I
the
agree
charge
with-
at that time. The town council didn't vote on anything at that time.
Go ahead.
At that meeting, it was discussed, but no action was taken to change anything in the charge. Therefore, it did remain unclear as to the line of authority.
Not required, because they voted that the building committee would follow the purchasing policy. So there was no need to change anything because there was a vote that the purchasing policy would be followed.
This was the September meeting, this last one?
I believe it was last month's
I don't remember them
meeting.
voting on anything. They didn't. There was no vote last meeting.
The initial setup of the charge.
I had gone to the town council in, I think, August and asked of the charge, and they, at that point, they had said that there were no changes, but that was prior to us learning about the impact of the state reimbursement
Right.
on the policy, and that's what,
There was a vote, though, to
in August.
regarding the inconsistencies that the town purchasing policy would be followed. At any rate, the goal here is to move this project along as quickly as possible, and that was one of the reasons that it was brought forth by the Director of Finance, because in the purchasing policy, it did have the building committee going back to the council, whereas the purchasing policy has it going to the town manager, which would greatly expedite the process by doing it that way than having to wait to either call a special meeting or the monthly meeting of the town council. That was one of the reasons. At any rate, I think that any inconsistencies can definitely be addressed, and the policies can be worked. We can work with the policies and make this whole process work. I think right now we're going out for 2 RFPs, and pretty much after that, once you hire the contractor, then the contractor would be the one. Correct me if I'm wrong.
There's gonna be a few other ones that this board will have to
Right.
go
We'll-
after.
We'll have at least 2 more.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is, again, the purchasing policy would be followed.
Right.
But I don't see a problem with regards to whether you call it a subcommittee or a selection committee. I think everything with regards to this can be addressed
So would you be,
amongst ourselves.
would you be okay then for the building committee to discuss and vote on the shortlist and the finalists?
And present it to,
And then after the finalists and the selection committee then opens the bids, they pick whoever, then it'll come to you for final approval.
Chief, I'm okay with it.
Basically, we wanna make sure that this,
if finance is good, I'm good.
you're okay with that, Sharon?
I
Sure.
am, and I don't know if you heard me, I am okay with what Rosanna just said.
Okay.
They had some really good questions that they submitted. Can you not hear me?
We can hear you.
They submitted some really good questions when we did the architect and the project manager, and for us to ask and follow up with the 2 firms, but all the firms. So I think their input is needed because they have a lot of knowledge and it's their project. So I am good with them having that, as long as the chief is okay with that.
So they want to vote on it and then bring the selection to us.
So,
Yes, Rosanna, correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't you vote on the architect and the project manager at a meeting, or am I wrong on that?
We officially voted.
I thought we brought your selection to you and the building committee voted. I could be totally wrong, so tell me if I am.
Nope, so you're right, for the shortlist, we voted. We did not vote for the
Okay,
finalists
all right,
until last week.
okay.
I made it official.
and
Okay,
again,
all right.
to dovetail this together, this is Jack again, Sharon. The traditional process that we've seen, client by client, is that the selection committee, subcommittee, sometimes it's the entire committee meeting in its full body, reviewing the qualifications, creating the short list, interviewing the firms, deliberating, making a decision, and then, like that client I said, has to go back to their board of selectmen. They summarize their process, said we've gone through all of these appropriate steps. We recommend entity X at a price of so-and-so as the person, the company to meet this particular need. And unless that approval entity has questions or disputes the process that they took, then they give their thumbprint of approval on it, and it becomes official. So whether that thumbprint is with the town manager, the town council, again, there is a higher authority that's endowed you with responsibilities, that's the town council. If they're happy with the town manager taking that step, perfect. As Tony says,
Right.
it's much more expedient. He works every day, town council doesn't meet
Yep.
every day.
Right.
So, I'll shoot from the hip without, the director of finance. I think it's acceptable, but I would defer until I have an opportunity to talk to the director of finance. But it sounds like what we did previously, and I don't see any reason why we couldn't continue doing it in that manner.
Previously, as in the last two firms?
Correct.
Well,
mean, you basically-
we would be at risk of not getting state reimbursement if we did it exactly the way we did it last time. Because this board has to vote and approve, it has to be in our records
That's a whole.
as a whole.
Well, yeah,
Well, I think that the distinction, again, with the wording of the charge versus what happened with the architect, and granted, you weren't even mentioned in the process of getting the PM on board, so, thank you, by the way.
I'd just like to say, by the way, Perkins, we're very happy you're here. There was no-
So
Let's
not-
talk about conflict, there's really no conflict.
Notwithstanding the process.
I believe the safeguards that are in place by the purchasing policy are an added benefit, in my opinion. As pointed out, rather than going back to the council, as stated, the purchasing policy gives the authority with the town manager, so it does make it more expedient.
So I think one of the other changes to charge then is instead of saying go to the town council, it should say go to town manager.
Except I disagree that the council has to make any changes, because they clarified that the purchasing policy would be followed. That would be my statement to the town council. And the reason was to clarify any inconsistencies. But as I said, I think earlier, this is a situation where I think we can resolve these issues. And similar to the previous, if you want to vote before it's approved officially, I mean, voting afterwards by this body, or your selection, I would deem that, and I'll defer, but your selection by vote would, in my opinion, wouldn't that be enough to cover that portion?
That would be, but again, as they pointed out last meeting, and that's why we prompted them to have the special motions on both the PM and the architect, is that they did not have a role in making that vote and making that choice. The choice was made outside of this body, so that they, through that action, put their fingerprints on it so that it's in the record for audit.
Right,
So
but
if
But like,
what
we
we're-
won't vote on something we're
what
not
we're
allowed to
talking-
discuss on in future times.
but even with the purchasing policy, the selection committee or the subgroup was still bringing back a selection to the town manager, and it was by vote. If they want to add the other step to bring it here first.
That's really the heart of it. I mean, the charge says, about the building committee shall select,
Yeah.
not we'll get a report from somebody else that a selection has been made. And I think that's where the fork in the road occurs.
So, recognizing the purchasing policy, if they want to, again, I feel more comfortable talking with the finance director first, but again, I think these are issues that can be resolved.
Sharon, do you think Mary Ann would have exception to the fact of what we're trying to do here?
I am not going to comment on that,
Okay.
because I can't say what Mary Ann's
Sure.
say.
No, I
But
understand.
I guess I'm confused, because I thought we, during the interview process, you guys had a say. And I guess,
We didn't have a
we
discussion.
got the
We didn't have to
Right,
st-
so
we
we
have
got
to
the person everybody agreed on to the town manager to sign off on, so I guess I'm missing
Yeah, the part you're
where you
missing.
guys didn't.
Sure. The part you're missing,
Okay,
Sharon, is that we need to have a discussion and vote for our records in order for the state to see it during their audit.
For the whole building committee.
Of the
As a
whole building committee, not a subcommittee. The whole
That was-
building committee has to discuss and vote on the selections, and it has to be recorded in our building committee minutes for the audit. If they don't see that, we are at risk of not getting
That
reimbursement.
was where the discrepancy was, where we
Right.
debated whether we could vote on it as a whole or just as a
Right.
subcommittee.
Exactly.
And that's what we need to clarify.
Right, and this building committee is not gonna vote on something we're not gonna have the opportunity to talk about. So we have to be able to discuss it so that we can vote on it, so it could be in our record. Now, the only scenario I can see where this could potentially be a conflict is if we voted on, let's say, not the lowest bid, and goes to the town manager and he rejects it, and then we'd have to have a discussion, and then it'd come back to the building committee, we'd have to vote again.
Yep.
But we're trying to do this to preserve our reimbursement from the state. I think that's in the best interest of the town. We want to make sure we check all of our boxes off. So we're not saying we're not going to follow the purchasing policy. We're just trying to add a little bit of extra oversight to it, that's all.
I would say that I have to talk to the finance director before I feel comfortable signing off on any changes that would need to be made. And if she's in agreement, I certainly have no objection.
Okay. If she's not in agreement, then this building committee would need to take measures to make sure we're not liable for any loss of reimbursement.
Well, whether it's, my opinion is whether it's approved by this committee after, or put into the record afterwards, it's still in the record.
We won't vote on something we can't discuss.
Yeah, I guess I am somewhat confused.
Well, I mean, think of the town council. Would the town council ever vote on something they can't discuss?
Well-
Will the Board of Education vote on something they can't discuss?
Whether it's the
Well, the
town
finance
council
board is
approving
the-
it or the town manager approving it in the manner in which it's written, it's still an entity that's not the building committee.
Right. Well, it also goes against the charge as it's written. So they would have to change a charge or basically
Okay,
remove that authority from us.
We've been down that street already, so,
Without all the information we have today. We didn't have the information about the risk to reimbursement from the state.
I don't
When that discussion was
understand,
had.
what's the risk of having the entire committee discuss it and vote on it?
well, I guess you could have the entire committee discuss it, vote on it, and then submit it.
That's what we're asking for. And then if you reject it, it comes back to us, we discuss it again and vote on whatever your recommendation that you feel like we have to go down.
Yeah, again,
So
if you-
Rosanna, can I clarify something with you?
Sure.
Is the selection committee going to, and I know you guys can all read all the proposals, and I'm all for that, but can we recommend the short list to you and
That's
then
what-
go from there?
That's what we're asking for.
Or do you want to be in the process of recommending the short list? I'm just trying to understand the whole process.
Yeah, so the process stands as it is today. The selection committee would pick the short list. They would bring that recommendation to the building committee. We'd have, just like we did last time, we'd discuss it, and then we'd approve it. And we didn't make any changes to what the selection committee came to us with. We just wanted to have a discussion. We bought into what was said, and we approved it. Same thing, we want to basically do that same thing with the finalists before the bid envelopes are opened up. Have a discussion, make sure that we're putting the right firms into the finalist bucket before those envelopes are opened up.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah.
is that okay? You agree with them, or what was that okay?
I think she liked it, is what I think she commented. Sharon, speak for yourself. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's what we did. We made a short list, we brought it to the building committee, they submitted questions. Rosanna compiled a whole bunch of questions, that they wanted answered, and we went from there.
Okay, I'm okay with all
But
that.
I think the difference is this go around, we're not gonna have questions submitted to the selection
Right,
committee.
it would be an open
That
discussion.
we'll have an open discussion and then the entire committee will vote on
Would vote on the selection committe's recommendation.
it. Correct.
Right. just make that clear too.
Exactly.
We're not, the building committee is not going to determine who the finalists are gonna be. The selection committee will. We're just going to have discussion about it, make sure we understand and agree with it, and then vote on it.
Sharon?
Yes, so Chief, we're, the selection committee is going through the proposals, we're making our short list, we're putting, together our scores, and then we are bringing that back to the building committee.
Right.
Ultimately, I think the selection committee makes a recommendation for who to go forward with, even after the envelopes are open, and the building committee still votes on.
I mean, we usually
Final
go with the
selection.
lowest bid, but if
Yeah.
for some reason the
Right.
lowest bid is, you know, if we're talking about like a
Yes.
couple $1,000,
There's some
there's
discretion
some,
there, we may want to.
there's some issue there that leads us away to the lowest bid, I think we'd have a conversation with the town manager before we really decide on anything at that point, or bring you into the conversation, Tony.
I'll go out on somewhat of a limb and say, at the moment, I see no problem with it. I think I can agree with what was discussed. However, I still want to talk with the
Sure.
Director of Finance.
Okay.
So, just to kind of clarify the steps after the short list, because I think we're very clear on that and comfortable with that. So then, short list is created, those firms are notified, the selection committee conducts the interviews by being the folks that ask the questions. The selection committee would have their discussions, like what happened last time, and do their rankings like they did last time. The other building committee members can be present to listen and gather their own thoughts. Then after all the interviews are completed, the selection committee would have a discussion based off of their rankings, come up with their finalists, and then there would be a full building committee meeting where the selection committee would present, these are the finalists, this is our reasons. The other building committee members can ask the selection committee questions. Did you think about this? Did you think about that? We would vote on our, finalist recommendation
And open the
and
envelopes.
open the envelopes, and then at that point, bring it to the town manager for final approval.
Actually, Sharon, one intermediate step could occur there once you open the envelopes, as in the scenario I described before. Yeah, I think X is my choice, but X is twice the price of Y, or there's some huge gap
Okay.
Right.
that you don't think that you could support, then even though the recommendation blinded from price might be for one firm, you might as a group decide to go in a different direction. And then that would be the recommendation.
Do we
that
have,
goes forward.
Okay.
do we have, Tony, capability if, let's say all the bids came back way high, higher than we have budgeted, can we reject all the bids and go
Yes.
back to them? We can do that. It's not in our purchasing policy, but we can do that, right?
Yes,
Okay. I just wanted to be clear on that. Okay. All right, I think we're
So
good.
what is our next step, though?
So I don't think there's
To
anything
have the
that can
conversation
be.
with Mary Ann.
Yeah, so Tony, if you can talk to her.
Yeah, I'll talk to her, and either her or I will get back to you.
Okay. You want me to lay out the process, or me write it out, so you're clear as to what you're gonna go to her with?
Sharon, you're clear, correct?
I'm clear what we have to discuss with Mary Ann tomorrow, yes.
Okay, I think, if you want to follow it up, if you want to write it, follow it up.
Yeah.
But.
I'll put it in writing just so we're all aligned as to what we're actually
Sure,
planning on
we'll
doing.
be discussing this tomorrow morning, and we should have an answer relatively quick for you.
And then that could be one of the things we put in our bylaws.
Whatever you want to put in the bylaws.
Well, I'll just say that would be appreciated, so as we do other selection committees, we'll know what process to follow. Just one quick question, so on the step where we would potentially renegotiate or reject bids, whatever that is it the subcommittee that does that, or the whole building committee?
At that point, the whole building committee is aware of it. We just have to work with the finance department and the town manager to figure out how to actually go do that.
Okay, all right, cool.
And if I remember right, there may be some language in the purchasing policy on.
There might be, I just don't remember it.
Yeah, so we'll definitely be happy to work with you and resolve these issues.
Perfect. Thank you, Tony.
Yep.
All right. Let's move backward now. Any other discussion before we move to the RFQs? Okay, all right. Let's start with the construction manager. You all should have gotten a copy. I know you weren't reading it while we were having our discussion, so I'll give you 2 minutes to peruse it. It feels like most of this is, I wouldn't say boilerplate, but boilerplate.
This was mostly, we're doing construction manager, I don't know if
Yeah,
to speak
did
out
we-
of turn.
Do we want to keep the 58 million under general scope, or I heard something about making it 50 million?
That's later when it comes to the construction budget, because
Oh,
this
construction
includes the soft costs, and that's why it says inclusive of all project costs.
Okay.
Yeah, so this was, Jack from Arcadis provided a template, and then Ken took it and put it into the same template and information from the previous RFQs for the architect and project manager. And Sharon also reviewed it, so that was our process up to this point.
The timeline on page 5, does that match Perkins' timeline? I don't know if it does. We had
That was-
project finish in, was it August or was it October? With the demolition and everything.
This was the timeline we used within the architect and PM
Okay.
RFQs, but if we want to adjust it, we
We
can.
probably should match their current timeline.
Was it 3 weeks?
No, I'm talking about the project estimated timeline we have.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, yeah.
Groundbreaking August of 23, end of August, like September 23. New building being complete in end of February of 25, is that right? Okay.
So start at
Can you just, yeah, thank you.
For the record, Joe Costa. Start of construction in October of 2023, with construction completed in March of 2025 of the building. And then demolition started April of 2025, ending really at the beginning of November that same year.
Okay. So if we can just make that update to the timeline.
Do that timeline, Rosanna?
I'm sorry?
Did you do this timeline?
Did I do this timeline?
Mhm.
I'll make a new timeline for you.
Can I-
Email
I'll do it today.
If you know that in the morning, then I'll incorporate it.
If I can suggest, it's a shift of a couple of months, but I would be reluctant to give the time away, regardless of how much time Perkins Eastman might like to have. I don't want to start unraveling the ball of yarn as far as schedule is concerned before we even hire the CM. So let's hold to the original,
Want to keep the dates?
the original dates
Keep the
and
dates as
see if
is.
we can improve on Perkins' schedule to get back to the original schedule.
I like this, okay.
Just a thought.
I'm okay with that. Anyone else have an issue with that?
I mean, ultimately, the CM will have a conversation about the construction schedule and the ultimate, best time to start and complete the project. So they're going to be part of the scheduling process.
I think what matters most is the overall time for it, right? Like 12 months, 18 months, whatever the duration is compared to when the start and end dates are. That's my guess.
Yeah,
Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement, but again, with an expectation that we want to be in sooner rather than later. Let's not be stretching those months out and shifting things to the right
Okay.
just yet. And as Joe's mentions, once the CM gets on board, we may find out that reality looks a little different than any of us is perceiving right now. So we'll have to have that conversation and negotiate a solution.
That's good project management, I approve.
Well, you tried that whole hour, you could have been tonight.
There you go. There you go. Any other comments or thoughts on this? Do you guys have a copy? Do you want a copy to look at?
As part of our discussion tonight, are we going to walk through and put together a proposed timeline for this, or we're just
Yeah.
approving the RFQ at this
So,
point?
did we think, we both read through this, was it 3 weeks too condensed of a timeline for the RFQs and RFP?
Yeah, we had a one-step process. It was a combined qualification and proposal
Yeah,
submission.
yeah.
So three weeks to just have them get their qualifications put together without having to go all through the legwork of putting together their staffing plan and coming up with an actual financial offer. I think as a qual submission only, 3 weeks should be sufficient.
Okay, so for the construction manager, so 3 weeks just for RFQ. And then how long to get the RFPs in? Another 3 weeks?
I would think another 2 weeks after the short list is announced should be fair.
So if we were to get these out by, say, next Wednesday, would we be enough time to finalize and get these posted?
Ken's retired, he can get it out by Friday.
It does have to be reviewed by the town attorney though.
Sharon, does the town attorney have to
So,
review
Russ,
that? Yeah.
So are you thinking that, you had to get these approved at the next building committee meeting, or we're just gonna go with the draft that we have tonight?
I think we're gonna approve the drafts we have tonight.
Okay,
And then talking about timeline for when we're gonna get this out to the state website and all that. You think we
okay,
can
yeah,
get it done
I
by
have,
Friday?
the town engineer's assistant is gonna help me with the town's website and everything.
Does it have to go to the attorney?
No, it does not.
Okay. So do you think by Friday we can get it posted?
Yeah, say that again, sorry.
Do you think by Friday we can get it posted?
I think there's a turnaround for the legal notice, but let me look into it. And can I email you tomorrow, Rosanna? I'm sorry.
Sure.
Sharon?
I'd say,
Yeah,
Sure.
and then, all the, and we discussed this today in, the office, all the, interview memos and the, everything is gonna go through the town manager's office because my office does not have time to do that. So we're gonna use Amanda. And she is gonna do like the letters, to schedule the interviews and all that kind of stuff, the short list and everything. Unless you guys have somebody who's gonna handle all that, but, I handled it the last time and
Lisa,
we
is that
really don't
something,
have an assistant office.
is that something you could do? Send out the emails and letters?
Yeah, if you give me like a template.
Yeah, Lisa can do it. for
Yeah,
us.
so we sent out the letters from the office and everything. We sent out the interview schedule, we sent out,
I
you
think
know,
you were
all that
handling it anyway,
type
kind of.
stuff
weren't you?
from,
Well, yeah, the point person afterwards.
Yeah, so Lisa ended up being the point person last time anyway, so we might as well just have her do it since she's kind of knows how to do it.
okay. All right, I just wanted to, you know, like I said, I discussed with the town manager and Amanda that that's all gonna go through her, not me anymore.
Tony, do you have any issue with Lisa doing it? Okay. She won't complain, I know. Okay. Thank you.
No, I just didn't think, she had the time. The town manager has Amanda and then another office staff. That's why I was offering their office. And, you know, like the RFQs are going to his office and everything, so.
Did we get clarification if they can go out electronically or if they have to be on paper?
Yeah,
The
is there any reason why we can't just email stuff out?
I will ask Amanda. I do not, and John Harriman, I do not know the answer to that question.
We sent emails last time as an afterthought and it worked out well. I feel like that gets them notice
Yeah.
to them faster.
Oh, letters, and then I sent the emails out as an afterthought, yes. So I can ask if we can just send all that stuff out electronically.
Yeah. Save postage, save the town some money.
Through the chair, Sharon, this is
Okay.
Jack. You mentioned posting legal notices. The state removed the requirement for state-funded school projects to post a legal notice in the paper. If that's a town requirement, then fine, you can, obviously you'll continue
It's
with
a
that.
town requirement, yeah, so Jack, it's a town requirement, so Mary Ann told me I'm still required to do that.
Very good.
It just costs us.
Okay.
All right, and then just to be fair to Lisa, for the process that we need to go through, does Lisa know everything, all the steps that need to be taken? I'm speaking working on your behalf.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I can talk to Sharon,
Okay.
in regards to what she wants me
Yeah.
to do.
Okay.
Or what she's done.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great,
So,
thanks.
so Lisa's gonna talk to you, Sharon, to figure out.
And I can send Lisa
Templates and
drafts
things.
of the legal notice, so she doesn't have to start from scratch.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Oh, very good. All right. Any discussion on the RFQ as it's written?
The only thing we're gonna need to finalize before, these things get, advertised and sent out is the date that they're required to be submitted.
So if we're gonna do, let's look at a calendar real quick. The calendar. We're going to have these out by, let's say, we're gonna aim for Friday. Wednesday being deadline, that means we should get, I'd say by the 28th of October. Wait, 1, 2, November 2nd would be 3 weeks from the 12th. How's everyone feel about that?
November 2nd?
Rosanna, I could book Friday. I would do the 4th.
The 4th, okay.
Yeah. And I don't know if you want to do 2 p.m. I have no idea what you guys want to do.
There's
we
10
clock them
a.m.
in. The town manager, they stamp them in.
It doesn't matter to me what time. Is there a reason why we do 10 a.m. versus 2 p.m.? No. Okay. Want to do
I do not know.
2 p.m. for the,
What do you typically do 2 p.m.?
all right, 2 p.m.
Okay. For both?
Yeah, for both.
Yeah.
For both,
And then,
yeah.
and then for the construction manager, we'll do a fast follow to get, notify the short list by email
So the,
with an approximate 2-week deadline for the
Yep.
proposal.
yep. So the
Good thing about
construction
we're-
manager.
Thanksgiving's super early this year, so.
Is it?
Yeah, we'll still have, the selection committee will still have to like review proposals, meet, recommend the short list to those, so there's gonna be time there as well. But yeah, we are gonna be looking into holidays.
So how do these dates work with the architect's schematic design deadline?
Our deadline, sorry. Our deadline for schematic is really at the end of the year, right before Christmas break.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure so that the CM is on board before
Because
they're
that's
finished
what-
so that they can
You
put
need
an
their input
estimate
on
on it.
those?
We do for their estimating. I think, we've got an estimator and they've got an estimator, and the two have to reconcile this.
How much,
You do that. You do three.
how much time will they need to do that? Because we'll be cutting it fairly close with this time.
Typically, we, once the documents are in deliverable form, we give the estimators 2 weeks to report out the pricing, and then we have reconciliation that goes on after that. They always complain 2 weeks isn't enough, but you lose a week here, you lose a week there, before you know it, you've slipped. 2 weeks, I would hold to an expectation of delivering it, and then, of course, it needs to be evaluated and reconciled between the parties. But I think that's probably in the type of language that I offered Ken as a template, so it should be in there somewhere.
So, should we push to get the RFQs out by Friday so that they have until the 28th of October to, submit?
I think so.
I think so. Okay.
Rosanna, let me check that out because I'm not going to be able, the legal notice turnaround is 2 days. So I just have to make sure that we can send it out before I put the legal notice in the paper.
Yeah, because with the Monday holiday,
So you have to put the,
7th, 11th,
I
the
know.
earliest would be the 12th.
so legal notice has to go out before you can put it on the website.
Typically we have put the legal notice out before we have, put the bids on the website, yes, but let me verify that.
Okay, because the state only requires the website, like the legal notice is just a Cromwell thing. So we don't need that for the state?
Right, so let me just, No, you do not need, so let me verify that tomorrow when I get into the office, if that's okay?
I'm gonna say for now, we're gonna pencil in October 28th on here.
Well, hold on a second. So, I think we can keep it November 2nd. So,
It's a Wednesday though, is that weird?
no, it's fine. So, after we receive the qualifications, they have 2 weeks to prepare and submit the proposal.
Yeah, but doesn't the proposal happen after the shortlist, not
Yeah,
after they?
we need time, we need like a week or so to put the short list together.
Well, fine, so, we're at November 9th, right?
Yeah,
We can have our short list go out and they're notified.
and they have 2 weeks.
Then
That's
2 weeks after that,
Thanksgiving.
that's like Thanksgiving,
Yeah,
right?
so they have their own first week of December now for interviews. No, yes, no,
There's,
yes.
yeah, so Thanksgiving is on the 24th, and then with the following week, Monday the 28th, then 29th, 30th, and then December 1st and 2nd that week. So it's,
So to me, it sounds like we could have a CM on board first week in December.
That'd be really tight if we're.
So,
I mean, we're talking
I'm
about 4
sorry, when were you
days.
thinking of interviews?
So, okay, let's go back again. So if they're submitting November 2nd, let's say it takes us a week, so November 9th.
But do we have a meeting that week?
We have a meeting on the 2nd.
yeah, some of these I'm wondering if we might need a special meeting in between.
We'll need a special meeting.
But one question I've got is, we probably need contracts signed before we have them on board to do the cost
Right,
estimating.
and that took, what, 2 weeks?
Yes, we do, and, we send the contract to the attorney.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so it seems like we're cutting it kind of close.
yeah. I'm gonna say, let's push for the 28th.
Recommendation on the topic of contracts. Although there was no form of contract offered to us, we were able to offer one, and then we moved through that process. I think that it would not be in the town's best interest. I don't know what the architect's contract looks like yet, but we'll leave that for record. When it comes to the CM, we don't want them offering some version of a contract. We want to provide that as part of a request for proposals. So I can work with, who's is Ken on you on both committees or just the CM? Both. The commissioning agent is less persnickety, but the CM, terms and conditions, general conditions, the contract itself has some very specific wording that will benefit the town.
Okay.
So
So basically have the contract.
I'll
earlier.
interface with Ken, and then we can bring the town's attorney in. While they're working on their qualifications, we can be working on the stipulations of the contract, so that once the short list is made, we can shoot the RFP and the contracts out the door quickly. And then part of the process is that, you either require them to accept the contract as presented, or you give them the opportunity at the time of proposal to speak now or forever hold their peace as far as any changes that they want to make. And that will further move the process along. Then once your interviews happen and your selection is made, the turnaround time on the contract is very prompt.
Okay. That makes sense to me. So, with that in mind, if we kept October 28th, let's just start there, then gives us a week. So by our November 2nd meeting, we can review on the short list. That gives us 3 days to look through everything. I don't know if that's enough time. A weekend and 3 days for the
Yeah, we
selection
had to
committees to
meet
go
on
through
that
all those.
Monday or
You think that's enough time?
Tuesday.
So November 2nd, then the building committee would vote on the
So
short
how
list.
is, yeah, like, I mean, are we gonna get we have to like get the proposals, right, get them
We get them on the 28th.
out to everybody on the committee,
Yeah. Then you have
and then meet either on.
5 days.
Well, we're not gonna meet on Halloween.
Will there be as much material to look through though if it's only gonna be the RFQs?
Yeah. It'd be a lot of material.
Yeah, that's
Should
the
we-
bulk of it.
Should we prioritize the, I don't mean to
We have to
assume, but
prioritize
the
the
construction
construction
manager
manager,
over
yeah.
the
Yeah,
commissioning agent? Okay.
absolutely. Right, so that the commissioning agent we can push out a week later. Or
Okay.
whatever. The commissioning agent doesn't impact anything immediately, right?
Not immediately. We would want them to look at the schematic version of the design and, owner's criteria, things like that. So there are activities in the schematic phase that would be appropriate for them to get involved in, so I don't think we want to defer it too far.
Okay.
Yeah, we're talking about doing an RFQ, RFP at the same time.
Right,
For the commissioning
for the
agent.
QA, yeah. Alright, commissioning. Okay, so the second, we would vote, shortlist, and then 2 weeks out, so we'd get email notification on the 3rd. We would do interviews 17th, 18th, 21st, around that time frame. And then just Thanksgiving, and then the 30th is our next building committee meeting, which we would then talk about finalists. So I'd say October 28th. We could probably do October 28th for both, for RFQs. Yeah, October 28th at 2 p.m. We'll just prioritize the interviews for the construction managers. Okay, any other discussion on the construction manager RFQ? Any other open items in here that need to be discussed? Okay, is there a motion to approve with the change of the date and time on the front cover to October 28th at 2 p.m.?
Do we have anything in here about submit questions by? I know that, did we catch that last time?
That's a good thing. We didn't put that in here. Or would that go in here, or would that go in like the email or letter that comes out?
For the town engineer, we put them in the RFP, we put when the questions have to be in by, and I thought they were in one of them. It was either the, commissioning agent or the other construction, but I can't remember, sorry.
I don't believe it was in either one. For the architect and the PM, we sent out an addendum specifying a closure date for questions. I can throw that in this real quick in
Yeah.
the morning though.
Yeah, was there, how many addendums did we send out? Just one?
Just the one. It was
Okay.
the
Question timeline?
cutoff date for the question.
Yeah, you just put it on the front cover,
Yeah,
right? So
that's-
it's, would you just put it on the front cover, that way it's clear as day?
Just say submit questions by this date. So when do we want questions submitted by? Week prior, October 21st? Okay.
Yes, because we have to post all those on our websites as addendums. We have to post all the questions and all the answers.
Okay. All right. And then also I noticed on page 9, you have to change the date and time as well.
1 p.m.
For the construction manager, page 9, so RFQ responses shall be clearly marked and submitted no later than,
Okay.
just update that to say October 28th at 2 p.m. Okay.
What cutoff date?
October 28th is when they need to submit by. The questions,
The
October 21st by 10 a.m.
Do you want, it's small, but do you want to sell the RFP and the clearly marked label?
Which one?
RFQ, RFP, yeah, on page 9.
On page 9.
It just says responses shall be clearly marked, and then you have RFQ/RFP.
Oh yeah, just take the RFP out. Just say RFQ.
That's throughout.
On page 9. the
Yeah, I guess take out all incidences or RFPs in here. So remove anything that says RFP. Any other findings? Okay, so is there a motion to approve this RFQ for the construction manager with the following changes? On the front cover, on or before October 28th, 2022 at 2 p.m. Same change on page 9, October 28th, 2002, 2 p.m. Removing all mentions of RFPs and adding a section related to questions submittal deadline of October 21st, 2022. I'll take a motion.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? No, okay. That one is all done. Moving right along. Okay, so for the commissioning agent, it's RFQ and RFP combined. We still have the October 28th date on here as well. We probably need to add the question deadline on here as well of October 21st. Any other comments?
Yes, page 9, Ken, at the bottom, I think because we were waiting on the date.
Yep.
Page 9 for the commissioning agent, all the way at the bottom. Just the date to be submitted by.
October 28th at 2 p.m.
Yep.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
just talking sidebar over here. The lift to produce the RFP, the qualification proposal for commissioning is a bit less arduous than for the CM. So if you want to give them 2 weeks to respond, you might be able to review them and get them basically out of the way before the CM shortlist is made.
RFQ and RFP together?
RFQ and RFP together.
Okay, so.
Give them 2 weeks to respond, a week and, before to ask their questions.
Alright, works with me. So October 21st then, as a deadline for submittals, October 14th for questions.
Well, if it's only posted on the 12th, the 14th is kind of tight.
Oh, is that the right dates? No, it's
I
gonna
thought we were talking posting on
this
this
Friday.
Friday.
the
It's
6th.
posted on the
Oh,
7th.
I see.
This does not make sense on that. Friday the 7th.
Yeah,
Yeah, Friday the 7th.
Commissioning's 10/21, questions 10/14.
And then fix that on page 9 as well.
I'll review the whole document.
Yeah, I mentioned the envelope thing. Pull that out. You made the changes to the insurance that
Yes.
Sharon requested?
Yes, he did.
Okay. All right, any other discussion on the QA? Is there a motion to approve with the following changes? Changing the date on the front cover and on page 9 to October 21st, 2022, and then adding a question deadline section of October 14th, 2022. Take a motion.
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Okay, moving right along. I like it. All right, next on the agenda, Arcadis, do you have a report for us?
Only thing I'll add to what we've already discussed is that we had a good kickoff meeting last Tuesday with the finance department. I think the meeting went well. I think it was good information was shared, and that and all the other things that we've already discussed.
Does Emily have what she needs to come up with a reporting strategy?
I believe she does. She had a death in the family, so she's been away for
Oh,
the week. But as soon as she gets back, we'll get that drafted up.
And when do you think we'll see a breakdown of the budget?
That will be a product of her
When she comes back?
reporting out of that meeting we had with finance.
Okay, because I think we would need to know those numbers prior to doing, obviously, the next two firms. We'd like to get a
So
clear
we'll
idea.
meet again in 2 weeks. We should have it by then.
Okay, perfect. Okay, Perkins Eastman, do you have a report for us?
We do. Thank you, Jack, for keeping that brief. For the record, I'm Joe Costa with Perkins Eastman. Joe Collada is not here tonight. He is down with COVID, but
Oh,
recovering.
no.
So we're keeping our fingers crossed on that. And you'll see him hopefully the next meeting. But I do have 3 Mikes with us.
Oh,
We met
fantastic.
Mike the last time, Mike Berger, our design principal. Next to him is Mike Segan, our landscape architect with Ricker Segan. And of course, we've got Mike Walsh from CESR Engineers. And all 3 of these guys are going to talk a little bit about what we've been doing the last couple of weeks. And we have been very busy. I don't know if you want to bring up the slideshow.
Yep.
Ooh, slideshow.
Yeah, we always have to talk with pictures. We're not really good with just words.
I'm a visual learner, so this is perfect for me.
So our agenda is really brief tonight, and we're going to keep it moving because we are getting kind of late. So we're going to give an update on what we've been doing as far as collecting information about the site and the buildings. We're going to talk a little bit about the program verification process and some of the things that we've noticed and what we're doing there. We're going to talk a little bit of site analysis, some of the first impressions that we have about the property and buildings and some of the potential locations for the new building. Mike's going to talk about mechanical systems, and that's sort of beginning step of a long process of identifying efficient systems, coming up with different options, and showing you some of the important measurements that will help you make a decision about your final mechanical system. We'll talk about the project schedule a little bit, where we are, and then we can talk about the next steps and what we plan on bringing to you the next meeting. Next slide. So programming and planning. We did meet with the educators and Dr. Macri last week. What we've been doing is really absorbing the ed spec and every single line item. Just for your information, there's over 100 lines of programs in the middle school and about 24 or 25 in the Board of Ed. Now, that does not mean there's 125 spaces. There's a lot more spaces in the combined buildings, but as far as identified lines of program within your buildings. And so what we've been doing is going through every single one of those in quite a bit of detail, just to understand where they came from, how the size of the spaces were developed, and the kinds of activities and settings that are most ideal for those particular spaces. You know, some of this stuff obviously we know a lot about, but we really want to hear directly from the educators and the folks that are going to be actually running the school and teaching students in those buildings how they actually use those spaces. And so they'll learn from us, and we also learn from them. So generally, this is the exact same program that you have here. And one of the things that we always try to do is we try to break down the program into graphic components that begin to allow us to sort of understand how these pieces and parts go together and how they can be grouped to support the educational mission at the school. The school, as you know, has 3 grades. 6, 7, and 8, and there's generally 21 classrooms, so that's 7 classrooms per grade. That's how it's broken up, with 2 science classrooms per grade. So this little diagram, in essence, shows how those come together. And they start developing this team approach within the building, and then that team approach will then begin to influence how the architecture comes together, how the spaces, the rooms, the corridors, and things like that. So there's really a method of us to try to understand and analyze the program to allow us to design it better, and to also align the organization of the building with how the school is going to teach and organize their students and teachers. And by the way, there's 13 divisions or packets of program, and some of those we are starting to come together. Like, for example, the kitchen and the food service will obviously turn into the cafeteria, but we're also starting to discover other relationships. For example, there's, go back one. So there's career development as well as the media center are starting to merge into an innovation center. A little bit different approach than a standalone library and a standalone tech ed place. We're starting to formulate ideas of how those spaces can really create a core of the building and also support, the STEAM curriculum and allow students to have a lot of flexibility. The other thing we're doing is we're looking at the actual sizes of every space. The ed spec had some sizes in them but we're also trying to match square footage with function and, you know, with appropriate setting and equipment. So all those things are sort of coming together, and we've got quite a few more meetings to have, but I think it's going to eventually come together. We did also spend some time talking about the central office, and what we discovered there is the desire to have lots and lots of private offices and some open office space. So what we need to do is find a balance between lots of little tiny offices and, you know, versus one big office. We understand that there needs to be a certain amount of privacy and separations between different offices because of the kind of information, but eventually we'll have to figure out a way to get this in a very compact arrangement. So right sizing the building is going to be very important. As was stated earlier, we do have a very tight budget, and that tight budget has to support not only the square footage, but also the site work, the demolition work, all the fees, expenses, and everything. So that pie starts getting sliced thinner and thinner and thinner. And one of the ways of controlling the budget, of course, is controlling the square footage. We also have the component of the state reimbursement. We obviously want to be within the state guidelines for square footage, and make sure that we maximize our reimbursement with eligibility. There are some components like the auditorium, which right now is currently sized for about 500 students. And as Jack will tell you, the state will support about half the enrollment for full eligibility. So part of that will not be eligible, and Jack and his team are going to work their magic to try to get that within the eligible column instead of the ineligible column. But that's something that we're going to be addressing later. Gymnasium is also another substantial space. Right now it's a high school sized gymnasium, so 50 by 80 with about 200 retractable bleacher seating and some support spaces all around it. But all that stuff is being, you know, really worked out. And the next time we come, we're actually going to show you some sample plans of how those spaces actually look with furniture and some other components, so that you can get a sense of the scale of the building that you guys are building. Okay. Mike?
Can you just briefly, when you mentioned you met with the educators, can you just kind of highlight like who you met with, how many educators, like kind of what did that process look like?
Yeah, it was actually a process where we went up to Dr. Macri's office, central office, and she had Ann, the principal, and she had the curriculum director, and she brought in a few other people within that office. We have some notes that we're going to be issuing to you. Yeah, yes, thank you. But it was actually not as formal as could have been. And we're going to have some additional meetings with each of the departments so that we record precisely things like, you know, what the nurse wants to have in the space, the food service director, all those kinds of things. So we'll have a very clear record of those discussions, so we can always refer to those later as we're developing those plans.
I assume that includes the teachers as well, right?
Yes, there are a few teachers. I don't have exactly the names, but thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, at our next meeting, I think it'd be helpful to kind of see like what your outline is for like that process for the more formalized meetings.
Sure, we can do that.
Awesome, thank you.
So we're going to switch gears and we're going to really start talking about your site. So we've had surveyors on the property as of last week doing a fresh survey, topographic and utility survey, really getting to establish the existing conditions. The other thing we did is we picked up several rolls of drawings of the building. It's been added to over a number of years, and one of the things we did there is we actually scanned those drawings, and those will be turned into a base drawing that will be used by our hazardous material consultant as well as our own internal team when we're developing the demolition drawings. We're not going to spend a lot of time detailing every single brick in that building. We don't really need to, because we're going to be putting a wrecking ball to it, but we do want to identify enough information such that the abatement folks and the demolition folks will have a clear indication of how the building is built and what it's going to take it away. That's a little bit down the line, but we want to make sure we capture the value of it when we do our estimates, even at schematics.
Sure. Again, good evening, Mike Segan. As Joe mentioned, we're the landscape architects. We work hand in hand, both with Mike and Joe, the architects, and the rest of the team in the development of the site and building design. So they don't work independently. The first step is really a site analysis. This isn't your school. This is something that we worked on with Perkins Eastman, and I don't think we're doing a round school here, Joe. No. Yeah, maybe. But again, the first step is a site analysis, and this is a diagram. We not only look at the property itself, but the surrounding neighborhood context. We look at those things that influence the site design, the issues that we have to respond to. The actual school site is about 16, almost 17 acres down in the southeast corner of Watrous Park here. And to the east is a residential neighborhood, and partially to the south. So it's kind of tucked right adjacent to the neighborhood, a really nice, wonderful kind of relationship with the neighborhood. The park extends down along the entire west side of the school. And then farther to the west are the agricultural fields. I see some signs out there. I don't know if that's part of the area that's being up for, so that may change. But you do have that little buffer here with the park that runs along that side. And then of course to the south is Woodside Intermediate School. Just from an overall circulation point of view, off of Gear is one of the main entrances into the school. And then also a secondary entrance coming from the east as well. What's interesting, probably won't have much of a factor, is the zoning line runs actually, what I'm doing here with the pointer, down below, which is the school site, is an R15 zone, and that just tells us the kind of local approvals and what criteria we have to adhere to. We'll need a special permit with planning and zoning. There's some other criteria that we have to meet in terms of buffers and building heights, that sort of thing. So that's the bigger picture here. Then we look at the site itself, try to understand, number one, what's on the site, what's the existing programs, how does it function, what are some of the issues we have to address. Obviously the school is kind of centrally located in the middle of the site. Soccer, softball, and baseball, we're anticipating we have to obviously replace these uses in the new program, new design. We also look at the circulation. Parent drop comes in and the main parking lot is here. We understand there's some significant backup, which is not uncommon. So we want to address that as well. We understand that maybe about 100 spaces are needed for the parent drop spaces. Bus comes in on this side, and I think the intent is to keep kind of the circulation of buses into the site from that direction. BOE parking is here, and the area of the building that BOE addresses. There are utilities that come in from this direction as well that we want to be aware of. Some really, I think, well-designed and looks like well-operated ball fields are down here that we want to preserve. And then a part of Watrous Park is to the west here, wooded area, all relatively flat area here. There's existing tree lines. We always like to preserve as many trees as we can on the site for a bunch of reasons. And then the school itself. So all the functioning are really down in this corner in terms of parking, circulation, and the school itself. Service comes in that way. Watrous Road, the entrance to the park is here. It comes up around, and the parking area is here. There is a gate here, but that's clearly closed, and I think it's to keep any circulation from coming through and getting into the neighborhood. So everything's in and out down at this entrance as well. This is our site analysis, and really what we're trying to do here is a bunch of layers. But first, what's the most developable area on the site for the new school building? We know we want to keep the school in operation while this building is being built. So all those functions that happen down here really want to remain, and there's a nice separation, and also clearly this is the obvious spot because of the flat land, the ball fields that are open, and again, you can maintain the operations of the existing school. The utilities are all coming in this way. They have to be maintained for the existing school while the new school is being built, and that's being also equipped with utilities as well. This is about 7 acres of area that is good size. We know as we get into these things, it's always difficult. The site is typically tight. As we look to get this program back on the site, usually there's additional parking, et cetera, and circulation is cleaned up, and it adds more development on the site. We do notice that this part of the park, we're looking at, see what if any restrictions are in terms of where the perimeter of this buildable area is. If we need to go 10 feet into the woods area, is that possible? And the surveyors are looking in terms of if there's anything on the deeds, et cetera, but we're looking for feedback on that. Could this area be used for outdoor learning, for instance? And how can that area be incorporated? And not talking about the whole area, but it's just obvious that this area up to the road seems to be really well in tune in terms of being connected to the existing site itself. So that's, I think, a really look. The road here, the park road, really has some possibilities for construction access. For instance, you want to keep construction activity away from the operation of the school. Also, you want to keep construction activity out of the neighborhood, so that might be a good access point for construction. It might even be, with the building being developed back here, a possibility for future emergency access to the school, as well as possibly even service access. So we're looking at all those things now. Everything's kind of open, and looking at the different relationships. I think everybody agrees that we want to stay away from these fields and all the development that's in the park and not impact that at all. So with that, we kind of go back and forth with Mike, and he looks at, starts to look at different options, and I'll really, if there's no questions, I'll turn it over to
Just a couple of questions, actually. The area in blue isn't necessarily the school, the Board of Ed land, right? That's Watchers Park, that's the town land. It's the area in red, including the school, that's the actual Board of Ed.
We're waiting for the surveyor to come back. They're out actively looking at this now. We don't see any lines on the land records that separate this from the park, other than the fence that was put out there at the edge of development for the school. So that's what we're trying to get confirmed, so we know exactly what our limitations are.
Right. We won't be able to use the town land without special authorization from them, so it just had to be. And then any plan that does not have parent drop-off coming off of Gear Street is probably not going to go over well either. So we want to avoid any going to any of the town or the neighborhoods for the parent drop-off area. Because I know you mentioned moving the potential site from the soccer field to the left of the school up north where that baseball field is. So we just have to be cognizant of that.
What was the last comment again? Could you repeat that?
So parent drop-off will have to happen off of Gear Street, the main road at the
Yes,
bottom.
that part I
if we move the building up north, I think I saw some plans suggested moving the building up north above where that baseball field is, as opposed to where the current soccer field is. So if we end up going down that road, we just have to be cognizant of the fact that the parents are going to have a long drive up to do the drop off. Which may not be a bad thing, 'cause you're
Less
cutting
traffic.
down less traffic for sure.
Yeah.
And the high school itself has a
Yeah.
pretty long road to the school.
Yeah, and again, we go back and forth in terms of how the site develops and the building develops, and we find that, you know, the ideal, I guess, relationship of all those elements.
Right.
So,
I just want to clarify, I mean, it might be some extra steps, but it's not out of the question that graded area, if that's town property, could be usable, right, for school purposes.
The town would have to authorize that. They'd have to
Right.
rezone it.
Right.
And then, yeah.
yeah, we weren't sure exactly, you know, was this cut out of the school? I mean, out of the park property initially, so it's just, wherever the development stopped, it looks
Yeah.
like the fences were put up. Again, we don't see any perimeter lines, but that's, we would
Yeah,
appreciate any input from this
Those,
side.
those baseball fields at the bottom are not part of the school either. Those are part of the town.
Yes.
So all of that is technically town property. School's technically town property.
Yeah.
You know what I
Well,
mean?
that's- yeah, that-
Board of Ed versus the town.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we look at all the options, and then we may say, hey, we can't do these, but let's
Right.
just say, hey, do these have some merit, and then we can say
I
what
think
would
if-
be needed to be.
I think if there was a benefit to utilizing that land, we could always go back to the town requesting rezoning, go to planning and zoning for that.
Yeah, because the potential benefit there, you know, there's some trees, I guess, between the residences, and we're talking about moving the soccer field over there, and there were some concerned neighbors, okay, are you gonna put lights in the soccer field, how long are you gonna be running that, what are you gonna do about noise and stuff
yeah,
like that, so
yeah.
I think the allure of kind of almost trying to say, well, there's
Move it
more of an
over.
area over here, maybe, but.
The other thing
That's
you have to
all.
keep in mind too is the Gear Street project, and that amount of land right there is kind of a buffer to that. If that were to ever go through, or any other similar project, if it's not that project, it's the next one. So we have to keep that in mind
Well,
as well.
that's gonna have its own, I mean, that's gonna have its own, type of parameter requirements in terms of the amount of shrubbery and trees that get put, you know, around. it as
I'm just,
well.
yeah, you don't know what's gonna go up there, so.
And one important point, we're not, because we shaded that as just an area to focus on, we're not talking about looking at that entire area.
Sure, sure,
We
sure.
may want to go
Encroaching in there a little bit.
10 feet
Yeah.
or 25 feet in, we don't know at this point.
Yep. That's fine.
Yeah, it's just fair, I think the point is, right, like, if there is value in it, we should explore it as an option.
Absolutely, sure.
I mean, obviously, we want to have a conversation with town planner and the land use authority before we suggest anything.
There are some small buildings in that area too that we have to be aware of.
I think you
There's,
got it, like, there's that, the group of citizens, like, the Scouts building, I don't know if you think of the
Yeah,
other.
there,
one.
Yeah,
there's,
Scouts
there's
building.
I think that's in there right
some
there,
buildings down in here. I don't think there's any buildings up through here.
They're not.
no. Okay, thank you. There's lots of.
Okay. So I'm going to briefly run through some of the interview diagrams and sketches and ideas. I know we presented to a number of you, and I know a few other firms did as well, so it might be a little fuzzy at this point. But we invested quite a bit of time and study in this effort, and learned a lot about the site. And we think that a lot of this stuff is still very relevant. I think we'll use this as a springboard as we move forward. So we're going to start with the first slide Mike just went over here. New school, two different locations, right? We know Tecton, the previous architect, looking at the school here for some obvious reasons, but we think maybe moving it a little bit farther north, and we'll illustrate why we think that might make some sense moving forward. And also the shape of the building, as we start to shape and carve this building, is going to start to look a little differently than the previous building did. I think for some obvious some obvious reasons. We think the length of the building was just a little too long for these younger kids, for middle school children. Also the orientation. Most of the classrooms are running north-south, which is really not your optimal orientation. As Ken and some others here know, you want to control the light of solar exposure in those spaces. Also, some of these green areas, some really small, kind of unusable courtyards within the building. So despite some shifting the orientation of the building, taking a look at you want to run classrooms for the most part, east-west, so you either have a southern or northern exposure, so you can really control that, the sun, take advantage of it, and also shade it and control it. So you'll see the classrooms in our diagrams, early diagrams, really kind of take on that orientation and make sure the building performs really, really well, right? So we looked at, what happens if we compress the building a little bit, make it, shorter travel distance, orient those classrooms a little bit better, have a clear separation of these kind of purple spaces as your public spaces and then your private spaces. We talk about a community center, community use, and after hours and evening, be able to lock down and secure a portion of the building, like so clustering these public spaces in one location and then creating these academic neighborhoods at another location in these fingers seem to make a lot of sense. But what it does, you still have a very similar queuing situation as you do now, right? We talk about building this building in this location here. We have the understanding that the cars still do back up to gear at some point. They just barely fit into the parking lot. Another concern is really kind of creating this island of a soccer field, right? You're idling buses and driving buses very, very close to these neighbors. You want to be a good neighbor. And also you're creating a vehicular barrier really between the school and some of the athletic fields. So during the day, students would have to, although it is a bus loop, potential opportunity for some conflicting use, right, between students and cars. You always want to avoid that. So we took a look at another option. There's one in between this, but this is option 3 that I think we're really gravitating towards for a number of reasons. One, the footprint of the building, which we would like to take another look at and really kind of develop this based on some of the discussions and the way the program is developing. And as Mike mentioned, we're talking just a little bit elbow room if necessary to kind of nestle into those woods. And some really great opportunities for some outdoor learning. What this does, a couple really nice things, it elongates that drop off, right? You're bringing all the cars onto the site, so you really don't have that backup onto the main road, and parents can queue up along this entire way and exit out with parking along the way. The buses now come along here, and now they start queuing up and idling deeper into the site, so parents and buses both drop off here at a common plaza and enter into the building. The Board of Ed can have their own kind of identity, softly touching the building, gently touching the building, can have their own front door and parking over here. What this also does is it really connects the building and grounds the building to your outdoor athletic areas. So students throughout the day no longer have to really venture into the vehicular zone, and they can access those fields. This is something we're going to continue to develop in the coming weeks. I think we're going to, again, use this as a starting point. Those academic neighborhoods, 2 teams, each grade would reside in one of these academic wings. We're going to explore a 2-story scheme, a 2-story option, which this is, with a very limited area as a 2-story. So this entire building would be a 1-story, and just one of these wings potentially be a single story. You'd have 6th grade, 7th grade, and then possibly 8th grade up on their own floor, and then that's it. We're also going to look at a single-story building and really weigh those options, right? No stairs, no elevator necessary, but more footings, more foundations, eats up more of the site. So that's something we're going to look at. And we learned, as Joe mentioned, we're looking at the learning commons. We think there's some nice strong synergy to maybe move the maker space and maybe the art and create this really nice innovation center at the center of the school. So again, very early, but I think there's some really nice things that the team explored and unraveled during the interview process. And I think we'll use this and move forward as we go.
What is that space in? What is that other part of the yellow? Was it academic? No, the other. Yeah.
Right here. Yep. So this right here. So this would be, and these red dots are really to indicate that you can really lock down these wings. Security, different layers of security. So this would be a corridor, and these yellow boxes here would be all classrooms.
So it's like more classes. You got 6. Oh, what is it? Academic neighborhood?
Academic neighborhoods, right? So 6th grade would have their own wing, right? But then it plugs back into this main hallways, main commons, and on the right hand side you have all your larger, noisier assembly spaces. Your cafeteria, your auditorium, your gymnasium. Maybe that's not the right orientation or right home for all these. Maybe the CAF wants to move up, or vice versa. So there's a number of variables within this diagram. But I think we really start with security and observation. So having, if I back up one, this box right here, admin, your eyes on anyone entering the site right up front. They have a nice secure entrance. And then as you work deeper into the building, then you start to have your academic neighborhoods on the quieter side, right? Kind of facing the woods and tucked into those woods, which I think could be a fantastic educational experience.
I have a few questions.
Sure.
Where is the central office?
Yep, central. I know this is hard to read on the screen. The central office is located over here. Zoom in.
Right.
So on this diagram,
It'll have its own separate entrance.
it's on, one central. Yep. Yep.
And then one of the biggest things I see fault with this is that we dropped a field. We had a baseball field, a softball field, and a soccer field. We can't drop a field.
Yep. Again, this is an early study, so
Okay.
we'll definitely look at. Mike will look at possibly overlaying the soccer field within.
There'll be a lynch mob if we give up a field.
we know that.
We can't do that.
That's also why you can see how tight the site is, why we want to look at maybe exploring a little bit into it.
And that's why we initially looked at a partial 2-story school to minimize that footprint.
So I've got a couple questions too. So with the, I'll say, angular hallways, does that take away from some of the square footage that we would need for some of the academic purposes? Is that a trade-off we're going to have to make?
Yeah, so there's a net to gross multiplier within the program that we're currently working on. So every space, you guys probably well aware of this. So a classroom 800 square feet. When you add all those up, there's a multiplier which accounts for wall thicknesses, toilet rooms, corridors, and then stairs. All that stuff that really kids aren't learning. But there is a need or desire from educators to create these breakout spaces. So again, this is a diagram to scale. We think the space, the size of that is going to be in flux when we come down to the bottom line. How big is this building? It has to be within a certain square footage. But creatively, we're going to try to carve out breakout spaces, collaboration spaces at different locations and different scales to meet their needs. So
Okay, so that's what's making up that additional width in those hallways. Okay, cool. One other question. So with backing the school up into the trees potentially, are there any security risks, or would there be any additional security measures in the trees? So in case anybody were to approach the school from Watchers Road.
Yeah, typically you would have security fencing along that perimeter, like there is now. And visually, the trees won't be coming right up to the building edge, so they'll be secure around the building itself. So, yeah, it's the same way the existing building backs up. Now there's neighborhood there, so you don't have public access from those points. But yeah, we would be very sensitive about the security along that perimeter.
Yeah.
It's a
Okay.
good question.
Yeah, because that's much more hidden even than what we've got today.
Yes.
All right, sorry, one more question. I won't keep you here all night. So with the design, we're familiar with the idea of having a 2-story building on one side and of course, a single floor on the other side for the learning pods. Where, let's say it's over the 6th grade neighborhood that you've got right there is the single story. Would it be designed such that 50 years from now, because we like to keep our schools around a long time, if they do need to add on, say the 5th grade had to move into the school, would it be designed such that it's easy for them to add on in the future?
So, thank you for the very very next slide right
Oh,
here.
good.
So we do.
Segue. Yeah. All right. Okay.
I'll pay you later. Yeah. Always, you have been doing this for many years. Always looking down the line for future expansion and the least headaches later on. Especially understanding that the schools will be occupied. So the least headaches, best bang for your buck. So yes, we'd like to build that space in. Yeah. Sure.
Also, just a question. We're talking about 2 stories. Is there any reason to not think about just 3 stories?
It is. First thing is scale. Residential scale. Building, and you are far enough away. There he goes. Above 35 feet. But it's also supervising. We like to minimize that unless we really have to. As an educator, shaking his head.
Those stairways would be where all the trouble happens.
I thought there's like drones and chips and they get tracking
stand
the
at the
kids
top
anymore.
Saying my son hang out.
All right, well, we'll just wait till college for them to cause trouble in the series.
Unfortunately, as the sites get smaller, buildings have to get taller. We're actually designing a 7-story high school in New York City right now.
Well,
Because
I know.
there's no land.
You gotta build up there, yeah.
But, ideally, 2-story would probably be the tallest you'd want to go here.
Okay.
We certainly have done middle schools with 3 stories in them, but again, it's small footprints.
Yeah.
You mentioned removing the courtyards. What was the thought behind that? Because I kind of like the courtyards.
The courtyards typically, yeah, we mentioned them because they're very small. They're very kind of unusable in scale. What we observed from, especially up against a high volume, they'd be in shade and shadow most of the day. We have successfully created courtyards in that round building that we showed you, the UFO building in West Hartford. It's a very successful program. The outdoor space, actually, we worked with Mike on that one, and it's utilized. It's right sized. It's academically programmed. There's an outdoor theater, and that space. And those are for younger students. It's kind of a corralled outdoor play space. We can go either way. We can explore if it's desired by the committee, by the educators to create that space. But there's plenty of open space on this site to create outdoor learning opportunities without actually, really locking in.
Yeah, I think one of the
Locking in
purpose-
a courtyard like that, a perfect example of a bad one is right behind us. It's unused, and actually in the previous iteration we saw, they were too small. You wouldn't grow grass in it. Nobody'd use them. But like what I like about this scheme is that you have like these fingers that extend out towards the park, and you get landscape all around it.
Yeah,
Certainly that space in the middle can be more protected with some landscape walls or fencing, or even changing some of the elevations. That can, but sorry about that.
That's
I
okay.
keep forgetting to push the button. So that space in between can really be developed as kind of a courtyard, but it's got enough depth and width to allow all of that natural light to come in there and be a space that you want to be. And it's also related to the learning commons, so you have this desire for outdoor learning in protected areas. I think that's a key to a successful middle school.
Yeah, and another reason is just the overall building circulation diagram. If you create a courtyard, you're creating loop circulation, you're creating the corridors on all 4 sides. So it's always about line of sight. So a teacher here can stand here and really observe most of these corridors, right? Visually. You start to create another corridor over here, you're creating kind of unsupervisable spaces around the building. It can be done. It can be done successfully. But I think we really try to, in what we've learned from project to project.
The other concern that we heard from some citizens was the parking, handicap accessible parking closer to the community area. So like the auditorium and the gymnasium. So either we put build those sections closer to the parking, or have some kind of, I see there's P parking under the soccer fields, so maybe that's where it would go, just.
Yep, again,
Be just cognizant of that. We don't want people walking too far to get to those
Of course,
areas.
absolutely. I think you have the idea to get close to the front door, and once you're in here, you have that shared comments, right? So you're out of the weather, you're inside the building, and then you enter into your venue. Michael solved that.
Yeah, and by code, those handicap spaces have to be the most convenient, closest to the building entrance.
Okay.
Any other questions? I'd like to switch gears a little bit and talk about some mechanical systems. Have tremendous patience tonight,
Well, they saved the best for last. Perfect. Thanks, Mike. No, I will try to keep everyone awake, because if you're talking about mechanical systems in your building isn't how you want to end your night. But I think it's important, so that's what matters. In all seriousness, we talked a lot about budget, schedule, and basically how long you're going to be in this building. So one of the biggest things we talk about with regards to first cost, how it's going to integrate into the building, and at the end of the day, your biggest utility cost is going to be mechanical systems. So obviously it's extremely important to make sure we're conditioning the building appropriately, and that means a bunch of different things to a bunch of different people, and I'll hit on that later. But what I wanted to start with is just a very little bit of background of how we go about understanding what the building needs to be conditioned. And when I talk about condition, that's heated, it's cooled, and it's ventilated. So those are our 3 main components, which make up obviously HVAC, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. But what we really start with is looking at an energy model. So we work very closely with Joe, Mike, and Joe to understand the building layout. So you heard Mike really highlight what the building orientation is going to look like. Extremely important to us, and that's why we like working with Perkins Eastman so much, because they are focused with that at the start. And we're starting out of the box to make sure the building is orientated in the way that's going to be best for it to operate. And our number one concern really goes to who's going to be in the building, and obviously that's the students and teachers. So we want an ideal indoor quality of air, lighting, and just how the overall building feels. And that ultimately ties back to how the system's going to perform, how big it is, and how much energy it's going to use. So we look at the building hour by hour throughout the entire year to understand when it's used. What's the temperature outside tonight at 9 o'clock versus what's the temperature outside on January 2nd at 2 in the morning. And that lets us understand how much time our systems have to run, how large they have to be sized, and ultimately ties back to how much energy we're going to use. And this group focuses a lot on energy, and you'll hear it talked about throughout the process, on really understanding we want to give you the best opportunity to make the right decision up front on your mechanical systems, your electrical systems, your plumbing and fire protection, because they are very important parts of the building. And so we'll work through making sure you understand why we're coming up with the decisions we are. And we like to put all the information on the table. And when we came to interview several weeks ago, I said we like to work with who's going to be maintaining the system at the end, and you as the owner, to give you all the options on the table. And so part of that discussion really comes to how are we making our decisions, and here's just some examples of when we're talking about making sure our heating and cooling unit, which is shown up on the roof here in the upper right side of the building, is sized to deal with heat gain and heat losses. And that's really what air conditioning and heating's doing. It's trying to overcome a heat gain. And your heat gain can be from outside weather, it can be from your computers, your TV, even a coffee pot as shown on the left. People give off heat. And so we're trying to cool down the space adequately, and in the summer what we're trying to make sure is you get that ideal indoor temperature and humidity. And the same thing's true in the winter. We're trying to overcome mostly what's going on the outside of the building and those cold outdoor temperatures to make sure we have enough heat capacity to make sure the space is comfortable and at the end of the day code compliant. We do this with a variety of different fuel sources, which I'll certainly talk to you guys more about as we go in the process. And whether it's electricity or fossil fuels, we'll talk about pros and cons as we go through each step. But most importantly, what goes on, like I said, as we start the building and try to understand what you need with the sizes, is how are you using the building? What's the equipment that goes in the building? What are the hours of use? Because again, at night, there's different outdoor temperatures, there's different amounts of people, and there's different amounts of light on compared to the middle of the day, the beginning of the day, and certainly weekends. And so these are questions that I will sit down and ask and work through. We talked about the commissioning agent coming on board, and one of their main points that Jack pointed out is them getting involved and absolutely understand what you're looking for from the owner side of things for the owner's project requirements. And we're going to be involved in that meeting as well to understand what you're looking for from the HVAC equipment, from the electrical, from the plumbing and fire protection. And maybe it's comfort based on what you know from the past. Maybe we're going to introduce you to some new systems that are being very successful in other public schools today. But these are some of the questions that we use to understand the sizing and systems that might work for you. We put all of that into working with Perkins Eastman, a model, as you can see here. So obviously that's a building you would never expect to see designed from Perkins Eastman because it's just square and not aesthetically pleasing. But you saw a little bit of kind of where Mike is thinking right now and where those solar exposures are. And when we put that into the program that we use, and here's a couple examples of the programs we really use. Train Trace the most. eQuest is a great building energy modeling program. But it is full modeling. It's understanding how much energy your building is going to use, again, like I said, in July, in August, in January, and February. So we can come to the table and say, if you pay more upfront first cost for this system, it's going to save you money over the life of the building. And again, we'll go through pros and cons through a lot of different matrices and putting all the information on the table. And again, why do we model? One of the biggest reasons we're modeling, as we talked about earlier, is EUI. So EUI stands for Energy Use Index, and what that's doing is telling you how much energy your building's using per square foot on a yearly basis. It gives you the ability to compare your building to the library down the street, to the middle school in a different town, and really understand Do we want to spend more money on insulation? Do we want to have a more efficient HVAC system, or really focus on the daylighting so we can turn our interior lights off and really focus on getting the daylighting to give us that free light during the day? But all of these are reasons that we do energy model. We get involved early, and the other one I'll highlight here is utility rebates. Oftentimes you pay more money up front, you will get money back from the utility because you're going to save energy for the life of the building. And then, as I mentioned with the rebates, there's all different types of rebates out there from the utilities, and we'll get to understand that. I'll lay some of them out as we have these conversations and the building design gets further developed. But I did just want to point out, these are 4 different items that we have successfully used on public schools in the past, and it's not a presentation that I'd give without highlighting the fact net zero is a big topic that you hear out there. So net zero is defined as a building that's essentially operating on its own with, at the end of the year, having no utility bill. So at some times of the year, you're taking power from the grid and you have photovoltaics at other times of the year that are giving you more than enough power. And end of the year, your utility bill is 0. And so that's always a great goal, but where we approach it as this design team is we like to be sensibly sustainable. So we understand there's a budget, we understand you have to stay within budget, and at the end of the day, maintain the systems. So we'll tell you how you can get to net zero, and we'll tell you steps that are very close to net zero and kind of things down the path, just so we can kind of talk through everything. EUI is what I talked on earlier. When we talk about energy use intensity, energy use index, sometimes you'll hear, and it always comes down to kBTU, so K stands for thousands, so thousands of BTU per square foot. And you'll hear us talk about that metric a lot as we compare your systems. It'll be a first cost. The EUI comes down to the utility cost, and then I think it's extremely important also to talk about maintenance cost, both of materials and labor hours to maintain your equipment. All of that's what's going to be involved in kind of the final decision of how we decide what's going to go into your building. And it all ties back to, like I mentioned, the sensible sustainability. And so we've worked in consulting engineering services. My firm, we've worked in town to help you guys with the photovoltaics on some of your other buildings. We've helped you with past school designs. And we always like to get involved and be as sustainable as possible, and that means something different to everyone we work with. And so we absolutely want to understand what the town's goal is with regard to sustainability, what the town wants to look at the building at the end of the day as accomplishing. And that's really one of the first questions I ask. What feedback have you gotten as the committee for what the town's trying to do with this building? And sometimes we have towns that really want to focus on geothermal, right? And that's one of the technologies that can heat and cool your building using the earth. Some towns really don't want to use fossil fuels anymore. Some towns really want solar photovoltaics very prominent. Some don't want to see them. And we'll work through all of that, but at the end of the day, I really do want to make sure sensible sustainability is something we constantly talk about. And the process as we go through, it's very similar. Obviously, a lot of it's more behind the scenes at when the building's finally constructed, but very much like the programming that you heard Mike and Joe talk about is what we're going to do on the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and fire protection systems. Is a lot of different iterations. Feel you guys out, and I'll go back to the drawing board, bring you different ideas. I'll run you models on the utility costs, first cost, the maintenance, just again at the end of the day, so all that information's on the table. And I do highlight here, you heard Jack talk about there's 3 cost estimators on the project. We very much rely on the cost estimator just like the architects do, just like Mike does, because we don't want to design something that's ultimately not going to be able to be built because of the budget.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate that. That was just a tip of the iceberg. You're going to hear a lot about mechanical and electrical systems. Yes.
Can I just ask a couple questions, sir?
Absolutely.
So, of course, the term net zero has been tossed around here, and we suspect that it may not fit within budget. Is it part of the design process, or would we incorporate into the design flexibility? So for the future, if we say we can't do solar panels right now, there will be structure available should we get the panels and plug them in later on. So it'll be designed so that we can adapt later on.
Absolutely.
Is that possible? Okay.
Yep, and so we call that net zero ready, and it's a great point to bring up. So the solar footprint absolutely is important. Where are we going to put the solar in the future? Can we afford the solar now? Can we afford it in the future? So that's one of the biggest things. But honestly, the biggest decision the committee is going to be faced with early, and some people feel much stronger than others, is to go net zero, to truly say we're going to be net zero in the future or we want to be net zero ready, it means you would remove any fossil fuels from the site, right? So we're going to go completely based on electricity for heating and cooling. And I know the old school mindset, it's a little bit nerve-wracking to say we're going to put electric heat in the building. It's not the electric heat that we used to install 20 years ago. So if you have electric heat at your house and it's a strip of baseboard, you put $1 into that, you get $1 out. Now with the efficiencies that are out there, you put $1 in and you get $5 of heating out. So the biggest thing to go net zero ready, and absolutely I would love to further discuss that and push down that road, is we would be walking away from the use of oil, propane, or natural gas, because we would go with the electrification side of things. And it also ties to, you hear a lot about decarbonization, right? And people want to focus on you're doing the best for the environment on your site, and you have faith someone else is going to clean up our power plants. I would love to be part of that discussion. It's something we talk about often. And I'll keep it short for these guys because
Okay.
I don't want to take all the thunder. But yes, what else did you have?
So just one other thing for the combination of both of you. So
Right.
if it's part of the ed spec and interest from the teachers and the administration, is it possible to design in almost like a science museum that the mechanical system is actually part of the curriculum or available to be used as part of the curriculum?
Yep, I'll give my brief answer, and then I know how these gentlemen feel about it. We love to do it. So, one of the things we have enacted is actually, involving the students in the process, up to and including having them be able to observe some construction. Also visually letting them be able to see what's going on, what's heating and cooling their building, and then obviously the most popular way is a dashboard in the lobby to say, you have walked away from this much carbon because we did this. Here's how much energy the solar panels are doing. So absolutely, using the HVAC, electrical, and plumbing as a tool is important. And I'm a mechanical engineer by degree. There are a lot of jobs in this industry in the future with regard to where sustainability is going. So a very good idea, yes. Right.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm even thinking like in the middle of the hallways, if you've got some ducting, is it on or is it off? By the way, the students could also maintain the building for you, but that's a whole other.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, but yeah. So just curious as part of that.
Yeah, creating the entire building as a teaching tool, that's really what we're trying to do. And it's very, very important for this generation that's coming up to understand the importance of sustainability and decarbonization. So that's going to be an important element that we're going to spend a lot of time talking about. We talked a little bit about the schedule, really no change here. This is our target scheduling, and as Jack mentioned, we're going to try to actually improve it, do better, and faster, because we want to get to construction as quickly as possible. We're motivated as much as you are to do that. We've got a long way to go, and we're just starting that process and developing ahead of steam. Next steps are really continuing what we've been doing, collecting information. We're going to continue to have conversations with town planners and others in the town to understand what the limitations of the site are. We're hoping our survey information starts rolling in. There's been a little bit of a slow up with the amount of rain we had, but we'll talk to the surveyor team tomorrow and find out when we're going to see some new maps. We're going to digitize all those plans I mentioned before. We're also going to continue to have follow-up meetings on the space program with the educators, making sure that we understand the program, we understand what's in this document. And remember, this was December 21, so this is already 9 months old, and things do change. People have different opinions. We want to make sure that we've got the absolute latest information on the building that we're designing. And we're also designing for flexibility. We talked about adding, but there's also within the building itself, we know that the building's going to last a very long time, 20, 30 years or longer, and how those spaces are going to be used for teaching will change. And we want to make sure that that flexibility is built into the plan. And then once we get that program nailed down, we'll present any plan or program adjustments, either up or down on any of the spaces. Also reporting on the eligible square footage based on the number of students that you have in the building.
And we can submit changes to the state once, Jack, for the ed specs?
You can tweak the ed spec more than once. It's reauthorization of funding, you have one more.
Okay.
Right, it's the money they care about. That's the state. And then, obviously, we've started thinking about the planning, through our analysis and through positioning, but there's a lot more of what Mike showed tonight that has to be done, and in much greater detail. And of course, we're gonna involve your committee as well as others in that process. We talked about a design subcommittee. I don't know if any more thought was given by this committee as far as assigning 2 or 3 people that we can talk to about all kinds of highly detailed bits of information. And then we're going to set up some design workshops with the larger Cromwell community. And obviously, we're going to follow your lead on who you want us to talk to and in how much detail. So that's also something we've got to keep in mind for the month of October and into November and December. Okay, that's pretty much our presentation tonight. We try to keep it as brief as possible. I know it's getting late.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the committee?
I do. I'm sorry, I know it is late. Just on the design workshops,
Yeah.
we may need to take a little bit of your lead on what would be in those workshops and how they'd be constructed. I know we can help with how to engage the community. Just need to get an idea of, is it 50 workshops or is it 3? Like,
Yeah.
And who you'd want at the workshops and,
Yeah. Well, obviously, it's schematic. It's sort of the big decisions, like where the building goes and generally how circulation is going to work. And then as we get into the subsequent phases, it'll be more highly detailed. So just sort of keep that in mind. It follows the development of the plans.
So is the workshops with the community or the workshops with the design subcommittee?
Both.
Okay.
Both. One of the decisions that you have to make as a committee is how much design influence do you want the larger community to have in the decision? It could be very narrow or it could be very broad. It's all up to you guys how you want to handle that. And by the way, we're willing to talk to anybody at any time.
Yeah.
Okay, about any subject. So it's not us to decide.
How'd you handle it, Ken, with WIS? Did you have a design subcommittee? Just everyone got together and spoke?
The whole committee.
Yeah.
I mean, I know really early on, 'cause I think I was on it, we talked about having a group that would meet more readily than every 2 weeks, because we were saying when the timeline comes in. I don't know if that was Farn thinking about at this phase, but, I know you said the whole committee could meet, but if it becomes, like on Monday nights, it was like, hey, can someone meet Wednesday at 10 a.m., like, for all of us to get together, that might be very difficult, and if we want to be nimble, I don't know how.
I think we need to set guidelines for a subcommittee as far as like what are they authorized to approve versus what would the broader building committee have to look at and approve, right? If we're talking like obvious major decisions, obviously the whole building committee would have to talk about it, but if we're talking something minor like,
It could still just be recommendation.
like where to put a closet, I don't think we all need to be in part of that discussion. So.
Well, hopefully some of the school spaces, the teachers and the educators are the ones that ultimately, decide more nuanced stuff. But as far as the community, at the very least, I think we want the most community input that we can get in terms of them making the decision. We may have to, for practical purposes, delegate some of that to a subcommittee or the broader group.
We can talk about that in our last item. Let's get through the rest of the agenda real quick. Communications subcommittee.
Sure. So our October newsletter went out earlier this week announcing the selection of the project manager, the architect, and introducing them to our broader community. So that'll be sent to our other town groups later this week and posted on Facebook tomorrow. Working through the reports that will go to town council for their meeting on, I want to say the 12th, and Board of Ed on the 11th of the month. And that again highlights the announcement of Perkins Eastman and Arcadis, continues to encourage our community participation, and then will highlight the next steps for our RFQ process for the construction manager and commissioning agent. Thank you.
No public comments, no one from public here. All right, so going back to the agenda here, design subcommittee, is this something we want to talk about right now? And
Was it something we want to think over the next 2 weeks and then have that on our agenda to discuss at our next meeting for action?
all right, do we have to have one right now? Is it, can we wait 2 weeks? Okay. All right, let's put it on next agenda. Think about it.
And then in terms of community engagement, like I understand that it's up to us for how much or how little, but if you have any like best practices to share, I think that might be helpful for us to just like start wrapping our minds around kind of like the pros and cons of what that might look like.
Sure, we can give you our thoughts. We'll get together with Jack and his team and we'll give you some
Okay.
guidelines on that.
Yeah, I think that could be helpful.
And then if you have anything for the community or the engaging the educators, anything like that you want to share with us prior to the next meeting, feel free to send it to me and I can share it with you. I think that's all I had. Anyone? I mean, there is one thing that we need to talk about, which is our involvement with the Gear Street project, but I don't think we need to have Perkins or Arcadis here for that discussion if you guys want to.
No, I'm sorry, I would just ask, so what was your, I guess, Perkins' recommendation on the design subcommittee? You said some groups have had it, have not, what?
Yeah, generally they have had it because, again, there's a lot of detail that you may not want to look at as a big group. Obviously, the big things like where to put the gym or where to put the cafeteria will be something that the entire committee wants to look. But much smaller, much more granular decisions in a quicker manner, I think can really be helpful. And then you could also bring that information to, the committee. You can describe the kind of discussions that happen.
So they'll do a lot of the legwork and then
Right.
just
Yeah.
bring the.
Like the selection committee,
Yeah, exactly.
they do a lot of front
It's
end
very
work and
helpful.
then.
And there will be people that are more interested in design than others. And so you want to kind of bring those people to that that personal strength or interest that they may have.
Is that something we would add to the bylaws too, what the authority of that subcommittee would be? Okay. So we'll craft that up. And do you have examples that you can share? Thank you. Okay, anyone have any other questions?
Who's interested in Beaman next Thursday, week
Oh,
from tomorrow?
yeah,
the
thank
tour?
you.
I tentatively set it up for Thursday, 3:45. It would be nice to look at that building too.
That would be the 13th,
Yes.
I think.
Is Ledger still on, even though there's only 3 of us?
I believe so.
Is that the date?
Yeah, I believe it is. No one's canceled with Dr. Macri. 11 at 3:45, right?
Yeah.
Which,
I should be booked it.
yeah, which one was that, Middletown?
Middletown.
This was the one that we were gonna go,
Yeah.
guys had to cancel our.
You said so Thursday, October 13th at 3:45,
No.
Middletown.
Yeah,
Did I get that
October
right?
13th, yeah, a week from tomorrow.
Okay. I can make that.
I have to just check my work schedule.
Heather said yes.
Yes, I'll be able to attend.
I'm a maybe.
Ken?
I had the pleasure of having a personal tour with John a couple of about a month back, so I'm gonna pass on this one.
Okay, all right.
I'll try, it can't be any earlier, it's like wait till school's out type of thing.
Yeah, we have to wait till school's out. And I don't wanna do it too late, because the principal's gonna give us a tour, so he's gonna be right there.
I'm a maybe.
Okay. All right.
We can do a time change a little bit if it helps anybody, or,
Actually, if it was 4 o'clock even,
Yeah,
that would
4
help.
o'clock would be a lot better.
yeah, sure. If we wanna, I'm sure he's okay with it.
Okay, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Just stall it.
We can, we can do 4 o'clock.
I'm a yes if you could do 4.
Okay.
Yeah, thank
Okay.
you.
We'll get most of us there, I think it'll be helpful.
Yeah, I'd love to do
And everyone can just message John directly to let him know
Yeah.
if you can attend or not. Okay. Okay, anything else? Okay. You guys can go. You're welcome. Good night, thank you.
Thank you.
Sharon, you can hang up too if you want.
Thank you.
Good night, Sharon.
John, what's the school's name again?
Beaman.
Oh, that's right.
The last thing I did want us to talk about is this whole Gear Street project and the comment that was made to us about our involvement with that. I did want to have a discussion. I know that there were some decisions made tonight, but let's assume that that's not the end of the story. So,
Do we know what the decisions were made or no? Is there any
Yes,
late
it
breaking
was-
news?
It was denied.
it was
It was
denied.
voted down.
Oh, by inland and wetlands?
Yes.
Okay. But the building committee needs to basically voice or have a say or look at the impact that the project would have on the safety and health of our students because of the proximity to the middle school, and we should be concerned with it.
I think it already was shot down, but that brings up the potential of it could be anything else in that area
Right.
now too.
Right.
So we gotta watch out for that.
It's gonna be something.
It's gonna be
Yeah.
something, yeah, so.
So I don't know if, I don't know what we could or should do in that regard. I'm not sure if this project, just because it didn't get through wetlands, means it's dead either. I don't know.
No, they'll
They'll
sue.
they'll just go back and change their plans again and come back again, is my guess.
Yeah.
So, do we want to ask planning and zoning to do a study? Because there's lots and lots and lots of studies out there. I've come to find out, did my own little research that linked health hazards with building these types of buildings next to school properties, kids coming up with asthma and a lot of respiratory issues as a result of these constructions. So I feel like that needs to be documented somewhere in the town. But I did want to have an open discussion here, thinking if we should get involved or not or whatnot. So I'd like to hear everyone's opinion on that.
Is the town just logically, are they gonna put money into a study like that if it hasn't even made it past inland wetlands?
I don't know. Well, I don't know if the firm is gonna go back and make changes and come back to inland wetlands. Like, I don't know what the status of that is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone.
Yeah, I
think
doubt
yet.
it's dead.
I think, like it's a fair question though, like can we, knowing that that property is for sale, right? It's likely not going to stay agricultural. Like, is it worth asking the question, like is there a study that can be done about kind of, because now it could be anything, right? So now you kind of have to expand the scope of like, what are the potential risks of different developments on that parcel of land of that size next to a school building.
Right, and I'm thinking too, that might impact our decision as to where to put the actual new building, right? If there's a building going up there, do we want to now put it as far away from that line as possible? Would we have to sacrifice a field to do that? Like, I don't know, like that's, I think, conversations we
Well,
have
it's
to
gonna be
have.
hard to do because of where the building is already.
I would say, is our footprint, I mean, is a couple hundred feet up really
I don't know.
going to have a,
I haven't seen studies that says if you're within 1,000 feet, 500 feet, 200 feet, that there's an impact, you know what I mean? And that's kind of where my issue is, like,
If
how
it-
far is far enough and how close is too close?
Well, I don't think this committee should pay for a study.
Oh, no, we
No.
would not pay for a study, no. But I feel like, do we need to bring up the
But
issue?
if the town were to do a study, they'd have to do a study just based on the zoning reg for the types of buildings that can be there, not just a 1 million square foot truck depot or whatever it was.
So they need to do a study saying what kind of buildings are allowed, considering the school being in that area.
Well, a study what is detrimental to a school for what's allowed to be zoned there, and then maybe that could influence a zone change.
So would we recommend that to planning and zoning? What do we recommend that to? Town council?
I would think it would go to planning and zoning because they're the ones who are in charge of what can be there and what cannot, right? So if the committee decides to do something, drafting a letter from the committee asking zoning to take a look at what's currently allowed there and make sure that, if we were to move that school over, that it wouldn't have a negative impact on the student population in that building. I mean, I think that's a fair ask to make sure we're not moving it closer to a problem.
But what I would be concerned with though is what if its present use, it has an impact to the current school? You know, are we opening ourselves up to some other issue that we're not aware of?
As the last 50 years, agricultural pesticides and herbicides being equally spread all over the place.
Yeah, exactly.
It opened an enormous can of worms. And I don't particularly see that function as well. Our charge is
It's really, I think we have a right to be concerned, but it's really not in our purview.
That's why I wanted to have a discussion, saying, well, what should we be doing?
Yeah, I mean, aren't the environmental studies that we're doing for the property that we're building on, isn't that gonna give us enough of an answer for, is the soil okay to put a school on? You know, those conditions, would that give us, I'm genuinely asking, would that give us enough information to say, all right, regardless, you know, whatever's happened up to this point around the school, we are in a position right now where it is a good property to build on and we can put it in these places. Would that answer that question? Should we be, you know, if we engage with planning and zoning?
Kids are running in that field every day. I really hope it's okay to run it.
Yeah.
Little until
but,
something covered.
Because what I'm wondering is, if we were to, say, send a letter to planning and zoning to have them investigate what's possible to put there, so should there be future development, because we are aware now that there is development discussions, regardless of what it turns out to be. Can they do a study that says what types of development could be done on that space, knowing that it's within some proximity of a school?
We could start by first getting what's it currently zoned for and what is currently allowed there, right? We could start with that.
I mean, it almost comes down to what comes first, the chicken or the egg. You know what I mean? If this is another 2 years before it makes it through all the steps, then as the town and building committee, we have a school here, we need to make sure it's not in a proximity that's going to be detrimental to the kids.
I think that
We have a school now.
the town planner sounds like, should be involved in this process, certainly with us, knowing what we're doing with the building. And as they think about, whatever that other use of that field might be, they'll have to consider, what restrictions they put on that.
Maybe we can invite him to our next meeting and have a discussion.
Sure, I might on my own, just, I could either do it on my own, or I can draft something if we all want to send it. I want to make sure that the town planner is actively engaged and, thinking about opportunities, because the footprint, that they showed it, it really is kind of awkward, right? Obviously for them and us, if we have this big, giant rectangular field, we can do anything. So we got to work with what we got, but I wonder if there is some ability for, they talk about the town giving out land, like when's the sell, and that's not town land, I know that's private agricultural land, but in other aspects, like whenever this town sells land, like that's it, like it's not, the town's never gonna get it back, but is there an opportunity to consider, hey, we're building a middle school, we're kind of in a tough footprint, we're trying to jigger some things around, and there might be fields get lost, and we infringe on some of the tree area. That field isn't like 80 acres or 100 acres. I mean, if they could, can the town purchase like a sliver, like 4 acres along the way, like either one to create an additional buffer for if the school were to go, or secondarily just to think about it as future use.
You mean buy the land from those owners?
Yeah, just a piece of land.
I don't think they can.
Yeah, they make a quid pro quo.
But
If they could, that'd be great. I just don't know. I don't know if they'd get the same value for that land and if you sold it to a private investor.
well,
I don't know.
I mean, I think that would be, I think that would be, a good thing. I mean, I think that would be, a good thing. I mean, I think that would be, a good thing. I mean, I think that would be, a good thing. I mean, I think that would be, a good thing. I mean, I think that would be, a good thing. I mean, I think that would be, a good thing. I mean, I think that would be, a good thing. I mean, I think that would be, a good thing. I mean, I think that would be, a good thing. I mean, I think that would be, a good thing. I mean, I think that would be, a good thing. I mean, I think that would be, a good thing. I mean, I think that would be, a good thing. I mean, I think that would be, a good thing. I mean, I think that would be, a good thing. I mean, I think that would be, a good thing. I mean, I think that would be, a good thing. I mean, I think that would be, a good thing. I mean, I think that would be, a good thing. I mean, I think that would Well, I mean, they have however many, 100 acres, so it's very hard, they're just trying to find a buyer to buy all 100. If the town says, we'll buy 4 from you, I don't think that degrades the value of the 96 they could sell in the future. But,
It'd be a good question, it'd be a
Yeah.
good discussion to have, for sure.
but you said invite the town planner. I don't know, we could invite them to a meeting, but make sure it's worth their time, but make sure that, they're working in close connection. I assume it's Stu Popper, is that what he was talking about, or maybe the town engineer?
So this wasn't brought up before. I mean, say this referendum never passed, and we weren't building a middle school.
Right.
It's still an issue, because it's still close to that
Oh, yeah.
development, so.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm just saying more, like, make sure
So no
when the
studies
town
were-
planner's involved, I'm not thinking necessarily
No
about
studies were done previous to this whole project.
Yeah, I don't think there's any studies been
Yeah.
done that talks about proximity to the schools.
Or even the park, I mean, the
Because
park.
it's
Or the park even,
If
yeah.
I
we
mean, the
didn't-
park's closer.
All they
We
care
weren't
about
even
are the
building this
wetlands.
middle school, the current middle school is still close.
Right.
But
yeah.
I think that's all the next step. Like the first step was inland wetlands.
I think that should be on
And
the
I don't think
developer.
planning and zoning wants anything, like, it hasn't made it there yet, so they're not even going down that road, because if it hasn't passed inland wetlands, their plans will change to get through that. So they're not gonna look at a plan that is then gonna have different iterations to get through the first step.
Here's the problem. I was going to put something down in writing, but not related to this warehouse. Just making sure that the town planner is integrally involved with thinking about the entirety of the town. So when we think about, oh, we're going to lose a softball field, we can't do that. I just think, are there other places that can we get creative, right? If we had to, can we get creative with the different spaces we had? Or think about, hey, there's spaces for sale that are abutting an existing park that can we get us there? I'm just saying, making sure that they're engaged, because once we kind of set a course and do it,
Right.
we don't want to be thinking 2 years from now, oh, like why didn't we think of that? Like just making sure that they're thinking about all options.
But do we have the option to, like, I think you're like talking about relocating a field
If we had
somewhere
to.
else. But I don't think is that even an option? Like, don't you have to have those fields on campus? Because then you're gonna have to deal with, like, if the kids have, if you move the softball field, then you have to get a bus to take those kids to the softball
And that's the
field.
problem with the football field now.
No, but I think what Matt's is saying is that if we utilize that extra land that is technically Watchers Park and put the park there, put the field there, it's still next to the building.
I mean, 10 feet is,
Right. As I'm saying, it's still there, we just,
Well, just make sure either that or, well, I mean, the tennis team has to go to Watchers Park, so they have to take a bus. So, I mean, there's fields at Wiz. I don't know if they're the right size, but that could be potentially walkable. I don't know. Like, I just want to make sure that someone's holistically thinking, not just about the 18 parcel, the 18 acres that sits on, but thinking about the entire.
well,
Like,
you have to wonder where the
town.
zoning is, right? Like, I'm sure the school was there before the park. So, is that school land? And,
That's what they're going to try
like,
to figure out with
you
the
know what I mean? I think we
surveyor,
kind of
yeah.
gotta wait until the survey comes out and see what.
But even still, from a cost standpoint, I mean, if they're gonna clear out all those trees and build this a field,
well, you know
seems
what?
like it's gonna be a
Tecton
large
had,
cost.
Tecton originally was gonna do that, clear out some of the trees. Remember they did that? They said that our property line actually went up to the road that led up to
Well,
Watchers Park.
that's what I think.
Right.
Like
I
that
think
may be
that-
that may be
As
ours
I recall,
anyway.
they said there's no clear mention of where it is. It's all town land
Town land.
because, and there's no like differentiation between the
Perkins
parts.
That's
said
what
that.
Hansa said too.
Yeah, somebody else said that too though before
There's
that.
nothing official.
So it,
How can there not be anything official?
Speaking
It's
of
all
cost, Matt, too,
buildings.
I mean, if they put that building up by the baseball field, a baseball field is gonna have to be rebuilt, and that's
That-
expensive.
yeah, yeah.
Which I
know.
so.
Why would a baseball field be expensive?
Just the whole landscaping of it, and everything, I mean, just the grading, new sod,
What
everything.
about drainage? Drainage.
Dugouts,
Where the-
drainage.
And if they had to clear trees
Right.
to create a softball field,
But we'd get
That's-
we'd get reimbursement for a portion of that. Yeah, sure.
but it
Because
comes
I
in
know
as a
that
gross
was the
cost.
original aspect, that baseball field was left untouched.
Yeah, I think they were just talking about repositioning the softball field.
That's what I'm worried about too, is that if you move it, now does that impact the total cost of the project? So you have more fields and.
Yeah, because it wasn't included in the original estimate to move it.
They know what the budget is, and they have to live with it.
But that means you're gonna sacrifice something else.
That's part of how it is.
I don't like it.
What do you think? Either invite the.
I like the idea of a letter. Go ahead and draft a letter and just send it to me so I can take a quick look. And that might be good.
We can certainly offer him.
Let's
to
start the discussion
come
with
to
him.
the-
Yeah, and then offer him if he wants to come and discuss it with us. I do think, I mean,
So
forget about this.
where did this request come from?
It's a Facebook comment. It wasn't so much a request for action, it was more like, I can read it to you.
It was just like follow the project and be the way it was happening.
Yeah, it wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, we've had folks throughout
Yeah, it wasn't
the
anything
project
exact.
kind of poking at it like, hey, is the project going to affect the school? Like,
Yeah.
what's it going to look like? So we've been fielding some of those questions along the way.
Yeah, it wasn't anything different than
Yeah.
what we've heard before, or like overly negative or anything. Just kind of, how are we thinking about this? Like Matt said, holistically.
His response
As a
to our
town.
meeting notice for today.
Our meeting agenda, because we were at the same time as Emily Mullins today.
Well, it's the second time I think that inland wetlands shut it down. or
Well, the
last
first time they
pulled
sent it
out.
back for for edits, right?
Okay.
For revisions. I don't
I
know
mean,
the
they went there on
technical
August.
term.
They went there
Yeah,
on
I think
August 6th.
was the
too,
this was the
so-
first actual vote.
Oh,
Yeah, this has been going on for
A year now, yeah.
maybe last time they had so many questions and they said don't bother vote.
Says you should be dialed into what's happening at the Inland Wetlands Watercourse meeting, as they will be deciding whether or not to let the truck terminal project go to the next round. A yes means your children's schools and fields will be within feet from crazy amounts of toxins, traffic, noise, and visual eyesore. What happens with Project Highlands directly impacts the CMS building project. Yeah, so no direct action to stay, informed.
Okay, any other discussion? So we're gonna go with the letter and.
So just to make sure I'm clear, the next step would be for a letter to the town planner to just kind of understand the scopes of those boundaries and what's possible and how that's being thought about, how the town's kind of looking at, the potential development of that land, the Millsville project, and then Washers Park.
I mean, Ken, just from the WIS project, do you recall at the time how involved were the different people from the town?
Pretty minimal involvement from the town. I mean, we had to go through all the commissions, planning and zoning.
Yeah. From a blessing standpoint, I mean proactively from a hey, like I'm the planner for the entire town of Cromwell. Maybe have some things to offer.
They weren't involved at all.
What was that land before? Was it a farm or something?
Yeah, the biggest issue we faced with that one is, I don't remember the dollar cost, but it was in the millions of soil removal from that site because they used to use a pesticide called dieldrin, and at the time it was in the 50s. Prior to the 50s, it was mandated by the federal government that any type of shrubbery plants that were going to be shipped across the Mississippi had to use farmers had to use dieldrin. And in the 50s, they determined it was a serious cancer agent. And so we ended up with this site. And I think we removed something in the neighborhood of 3 feet of the soil from that entire site. Millions and millions of dollars. for that
It couldn't get
project.
cleaned, the soil?
Pardon me?
It couldn't get cleaned?
But it was just where the testing went is where they ended up, no more dieldrin. We dug down and removed that, and then that
I
had
thought there was a way to
be-
clean the dirt or something, they were saying.
We ended up taking it off-site and dumping it up in Massachusetts.
But maybe a bad example, it's just, like you said, it was a farm before. So I mean, at least you had a little bit more blank slate, right? Like you kind of had a lot of liberty, aside from having to deal with the soil issue. You had a lot of creative liberty there about what to do, whereas we're trying to modify an existing, right? We're trying to do, this isn't new construction, it's rebuild, and that's always trickier, so. Okay. I'll draft something up if you like it, you know.
Thank
send
you.
it.
Several years later, the parcel of land directly adjacent was a housing development. They did dug basements, put housing in.
Yeah, they're doing it right now, right? Right next to Wes.
Where the foxes live.
Funny how double the standards.
I guess it's not so bad for those homes. Maybe in the 20 years, you know, it's a 20-year
Well, they're digging the
degradation.
foundation,
But the committee at the time, once we did the environmental studies, we felt we had no option other than, because it was going to be an immediate standard on the property, to get as a clean possible site as possible could. So it wasn't really a controversy, it was just a cost issue that we had to absorb.
Okay, any other discussion? Anything else anyone wants to bring up? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Third.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay and stay here. Okay.